and we will be
Yo.
talking about Exodus. I'm going to decrease your. Oh, you got the fan on, I'm guessing, yeah?
Oh, snap. Yeah, flip. They
No, it's
need
okay.
to.
It's not too bad. If you could maybe just move the direction a little bit to the other side, that'd be great. But yeah, listen, we're talking Exodus today, and primarily what I wanted to go over is the timeline. I have been reading the books. I haven't really been deep diving into the lore from the Exodus website. I've been trying to use
Yo.
the book as a framework to move on from. However, I think using both of them in combination is it's actually really good because the website gives you tidbits and information, and the book then kind of expands on certain things, and vice versa. So I'm still learning. I'm still getting engaged. And what I will say is that just from a law perspective, there is so much possibilities with this franchise. There's so many stories to tell. I love its use of time dilation. I love the use of humans as kind of aliens, and we'll get into that a little bit more. But it's truly something that could be special, and I look forward to not even just what this game provides, but what the next game could provide, based on the success of this one. Um, Before we shoot off into some questions and some introductions, I'll give a quick introduction, and Ashes, we can hash out some points, and then start going over some of the timelines. So the first thing is Exodus is an eagerly anticipated AAA science fiction action adventure role playing game that promises to blend intricate storytelling with dynamic gameplay, drawing upon the rich tapestry of sci-fi themes like time dilation and interstellar travel. At the helm of Exodus is Archetype Entertainment, the studio established in 2019 under Wizards of the Coast. The studio is led by industry veterans, particularly James Olsen, who serves as a co founder, studio head, and executive creative director. Olsen's previous roles include being the lead designer of iconic games like Baldur's Gate, Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic, and Dragon Age Origins. On the other side of it, from a story perspective, we have Drew Kasparian. I used to just say Kasparian,
Carpesian.
but
I call him Carpesian.
Drew Karpyshyn,
I think
known
that's
for
how
his
you say.
work as the lead writer of Mass Effect, is the narrative director for Exodus. His involvement ensures a story rich with choice and consequences, where decisions made by player have impacts that echo through the ages due to the game's key mechanic, time dilation. Now, from a studio perspective, they also have individuals who have worked on Halo. They have individuals who worked on Naughty Dog as well. So it's quite there's experience there. My question is, just from me saying those two names, James Olsen and Drew Kasperson, um, does that instill faith in you for this product?
Um. So who's the like? I know Drew very well. I'm very familiar with Drew, and I'm very familiar with Casey Hudson. Who's the other guy?
Yeah, so James is, let me get up all right. He serves as the co-founder, studio head, and he's the one who
Yeah.
he was the lead designer for Baldur's Gate and Star Wars
Oh.
Knights of the
Okay.
Old Republic. And he also, I think, was the creative director of Dragon Age Origins.
Yeah.
I actually had a discussion with someone about this, and he said that Exodus is the Mass Effect successor, and it wasn't Casey Hudson's studio, Humanoid Studios, right? And I disagreed because when you ask BioWare fans, who they know, they would say, well, it's Mass Effect, and we know Casey Hudson was behind that, and
Yeah.
they would also
That's his
say
baby.
that Dragon Age Inquisition was the best-selling Dragon Age game, and that wasn't James Olsen. James Olsen is a old school Bioware guy. He's one of the guys who led the studio into being what it is. Well, not what it is
Yes.
being today,
Yes. Okay.
but into them being very successful. So I would always say is in Casey Hudson is what Mass Effect fans or Bioware fans are looking forward to. However, if I'm going to steel man that position, what I will say is when you think about Mass Effect and all these games, you think about the actual story, because the story is the soul of Mass Effect, and the person who was involved in that story is Drew. It wasn't Casey Hudson that was writing these scripts; he was the one that was kind of directing. So, if the story is the soul, and that's Drew, then you can make a very good argument that Exodus is the spiritual successor to Mass Effect.
I agree,
Hmm.
but I've got a little bit of a but today. So what you're saying is absolutely true. But I think for me, what's important, like both of those elements are important. But I mean by elements, I mean like both Drew and Casey. I think they can be seen as the mother and the father of like Mass Effect. Would you agree with me on that?
Yeah, I would agree, 100%.
I think whatever they do next can be seen as somewhat of like a whichever, whether it's Drew or depending, of course, the sort of projects that they choose.
Hmm.
I would have loved to see, and of course, as a fan, we always have these these dream scenarios. I would have loved to see, like, for instance, whatever humanoid or whoever was left over at humanoid to maybe hear news like no humanoid has now merged with what's this company that's making
Archetype.
exo archetype,
Hmm.
which is like both sound very similar, by the way. But like I would have loved to see that and maybe see the two of them work together again. But like I think there's reasons why they probably don't get along. Who knows? But like there must be reasons why they've not sort of gone out of, because it seems like both of them have a goal to recreate that magic that they had with the Mass Effect trilogy. But for some reason they've just not ended up in the same space where they can do so.
I think it makes me listen, I was speaking to a guy and he's very critical of Casey Hudson. Maybe one of these days
Hmm.
I could get him on. He actually believes that Casey isn't a good manager. He kind of blames him for the fall of BioWare, and
Yeah.
he looks at the fact that, like, well, Casey also came back and was involved in some way, shape, or form with Anthem. He looks at the fact that, like, Casey, like, when Drew left, for the story, Casey is the one who pushed Mass Effect 3 still, right? So he was
Yeah.
very critical of him in that element. But I think it just probably came down to just finance. I think Archetype,
Yeah.
reached out to James at the right time. Casey already had his own studio and was already doing his own thing.
Yeah.
And eventually that's just what happened. So I don't think there's any real,
Animosity.
yeah, no, no, I'm sure they're probably, respectful towards each other. But also, like, I think they're also on different teams, because obviously James was working on Knights of the Old Republic
Yeah.
and the early Dragon Age game, whereas Casey was kind of in full on with Mass Effect at that time. So James doesn't really have any. I don't think he even touched Mass Effect in any way, shape, or form. So it's not really his
No,
kid.
no, no, no. He was way gone.
Yeah, he was doing
Like
something. It was completely.
when you said to me Baldur's Gate, I thought, okay, cool. This was before I was a fan of because I only jumped onto the literally what introduced me to BioWare was Knights of the Old Republic. So okay, maybe it wasn't before my time. But
Mhm.
like the games like Baldur's Gate 1 and 2, those were way before my time. The asymmetric games that they used to make with forgot what the engine name was called, but it was a BioWare in-house engine. Um
Could you
so
be
yeah, no.
referring to Jade Empire?
No, no. Jade Empire was by Jade Empire. I was on board with Bioware. I think I was not a huge fan, but
Mm.
I had already played Knights of the Old Republic 1 and 2,
You were
and
you were getting there.
yeah.
Okay.
I had not played, like, I won't lie, like Knights of the Old Republic really blew me. It's away. Like it was the first time I actually felt like a Jedi in the Star Wars universe.
Hmm.
And I actually, for some reason, it gripped me more than any other Star Wars game I'd played before. So yeah, I could tell there was magic there. That's why I connected instantly with Mass Effect when I got it on the 360.
Okay. Well, we can do some time. Listen, I have some questions. I have some timeline things to go through, and this would
Mm-hmm.
be, like I said, it'll be like a learning process for probably both of us, as we
Yeah.
deep dive a little bit more into the lore. And I will say the lore is it's really interesting. Like, from a
Mm.
potential point of view, there's a lot to like there. So I don't know if you can see the screen.
Yep, I can.
I'll make this a bit smaller. So, in 2200 AD, fleeing a dying Earth,
Mm-hmm.
governments and other powerful organizations began launching fleets of rock ships out into the galaxy, seeking a new home for humanity. Within 2 centuries, Earth is completely abandoned. All that remains of humanity, our achievements, cultures, and history, is aboard the arc ships, traveling at near light speed through the dark void of space. Humanity constructed a fleet of arc ships and fled the dying Earth. Traveling at light speed, these ships were capable of crossing vast distances within the span of just a few generations. They sought only one thing: to find a new home among the stars. They found a habitable galaxy in Centauri. Now, I think any sci-fi game is always going to have to deal with, this element, like what happened to Earth. And we saw in Starfield that, the same thing happened. Earth was going through some issues. I actually think Starfield's way they handled it was pretty good, because obviously it was the situation of, hey, we're gonna use this ability to jump to different points, and that's actually going to affect the time space, which is going to end up destroying Earth's atmosphere. That was actually really clever, and I really like the way they did that. So humanity found out too late. They're like, hey, listen, this new technology has been destroying Earth, so now we got to bounce. But conveniently, the technology actually allows us to bounce, so that's really good. But this one, it's always going to be something to do with global warming, right? And it doesn't say here, but once you go further into the lore, it talks about how sea levels, the oceans were contaminated, and CO2 emissions were at an all-time high, and the atmosphere was bad. Kids had asthma, right? So that is there. What do you think about the idea of, I guess you could say, just sticking to the typical trope of, global warming, or would you have preferred it if they had been a bit more creative? I think it's standard, and I think it's okay.
Yeah,
I have no issues there.
Yeah, no, I also don't have a problem with it. Look, to your point, it could be a little bit more original. Like, I like the fact that in the Mass Effect universe, we actually followed closer to like the Star Trek path, where we actually excelled. And like in the Star Wars, like for instance, right now in the Mass Effect universe, I don't think you can have a situation where humanity can wipe itself out, because we've progressed past that. So I think, yeah, I mean, like a lot of people have that outlook that we are eventually going to destroy ourselves. And I suppose it is one of the, if you look at like our trajectory currently, in terms of are we gonna self-correct enough before that stuff can happen? Are we gonna make the right decisions in the next 100 years, 1,000 years or so? So I'm not, yeah, like I'm not really attached to it. I'm not really against it. But to your point, they could have made it a little bit more original in terms of like why we left the Earth. Because again, I just think that humanity, if you look at us as a species, it's very difficult for us to self-destruct, because of the fact that we're very good at self-correcting in a long enough timeline. I mean, if you think about it, we were supposed to blow each other up, or ourselves up in the Cold War. We were supposed to wipe the world out in the Second World War when we discovered the atom bomb, but we don't. We learn from our mistakes and we do better. So I think it is an outlook, and it's going to be interesting to see if they can sort of flesh that out in a different way than it's been done before. But I'm a little bit more optimistic about humanity typically.
I'll add something here to it, because once I was reading like the lore a little bit more, you get different perspectives, which I think are really interesting. And there's a teacher who is talking about how obviously the kids have asthma, and
Yeah.
how people talk about leaving Earth. And the key thing here is, because there's less resources, because CO2 emissions have risen, and people can't really breathe properly, because the oceans are damaged, so there's short water supply. You've created a situation where each nation is that would seem to be allies have now become antagonistic towards each other, because now you need to take care
Yeah.
of your own people. So there's this cycle of tension and violence, right, that I think gets created. And it mentions how corporations, I think this is really interesting. It's so interesting that I'm not even focused on the main game anymore. I'm looking at
Yeah.
the history. Like, I want to know more about this. I don't know how people were living. So you have these corporations have become really powerful. So not entirely like cyberpunk, but in the situation where they create resources, the trillionaires, or whatever you want to call it. So they have more power and they have more influence over governments, and governments actually hate them. So now
Yeah.
I want to know how that dynamic works. And there's a guy in the book who I believe is called like a counterpract, or something, some new word that they created for these really rich people. And he speaks about how he was genetically engineered, right? So I drew that connection straight away, that okay, you have this teacher who's taking the kids out on a tour to see trees, right? And the trees have been damaged a lot, obviously, or whatever you want to call it. But the reason why she's able to do it is because the weather isn't so bad and the kids who have asthma can participate. But on the other side, you have this trillionaire guy who can do whatever he wants, and he's genetically modified, so this doesn't affect him. So there's just a huge disparity there with money, with the rich and the poor. And he's hated so much that he has to hire like personal bodyguards to follow him everywhere.
Wow.
So that shows that it's not just the government, it's the people as well that hate him with a passion. So I think that dynamic is really, really interesting. It felt very cyberpunk, like, like the people at the bottom are at the very bottom, and the people at the top, the people at the top are even more secluded from the rest of society. And then moving on to that, so once I a couple months ago, I was like, okay, so there's actually genetically engineering now. So human beings are not just think I'm doing this, in the future. This is actually part of the makeup of this society. And then there's another situation where there's a guy who's building the arc ships, and the arc ships are being built by different types of people, right? The government is building this to help their people, but you also have these trillionaires who are building it, and these guys, they're inviting only like the friends, only people who are able to be like scientists, doctors, people with good genes. And the techno guy, one of the things he does, one of these other techno guys, is he's picking and choosing who he wants, and he's not caring about the people at the very bottom, which then reminds me of a TV show, the train show. What the hell is it called again? Damn. The train show where everyone is living on a train and the world has ended. Do you remember the name?
Yeah, I know it. It's is it the Snowpiercer?
Snowpiercer, exactly. And it's the same dynamic that this technocrat guy is actually trying to create. He's like, this, I don't care about people at the bottom, people who are cleaning the stuff, whatever it is. Even when he has a chance to have less luxury on his own arc ship to benefit the people at the bottom, he chooses not to. And he's very outspoken, tells them like, go fuck yourselves, whatever it is. Now, the engineers end up leaving his capsule behind on purpose, and then they steal his his arc ship. So him and all his
I saw that.
Yeah. So once again, if you show me that, you're kind of implying that like there's backstabbing, there's so many different concepts that is happening back on Earth that makes me more invested in your story. So I thought that was really, really cool, and I'll probably expand on that more on when I make these videos. But yeah, how does that sound like to you? Anything that you can glean from these story points that you think would add to the Exodus story, at least just from a fan point of view, in terms of just thinking, wishful thinking.
I hope they take the same, and like I'm gonna bring up to nauseam, I suppose. I'm gonna make a lot of comparisons to like what we have with Mass Effect, because it's the best example that I I have as a reference. I hope you don't mind.
You go ahead.
So I hope they do, or they take us a few lessons. And again, like I have never played the first two Baldur's Gate games, so I can't remember if like, and even with the Neverwinter Nights games, I can't remember how those games, just in terms of like story wise, how they open. But I hope they take a lot of inspiration from how the first Mass Effect game opens, where they make use of those unique moments where you can balance gameplay and story, and it's not a situation where they just show you the stuff, if I'm making any sense. So I'm very anti sort of like just CG trailers for the sake of CG trailer. All the stuff that you just said, I hope a lot of it, whatever the elements are gonna touch on, like to on our protagonist, I hope a lot of it is us experiencing it. Like for instance with Baldur's Gate 3, where the opening scene sort of gets you involved in the conflict in the world, in the main bad guy that you're going to be basically facing, or the main conflict that you're going to be dealing with throughout the game. You get to interact with that live, and you start making choices from the onset. I believe like the first 30 to 45 minutes of Baldur's Gate was just gameplay, with like parts where you get to sort of have conversations and make decisions in those conversations, and then the rest of it is action. So I hope they build this or structure this in a way that they get you involved and not just show it to you like with a CG trailer and then you have to do some random thing after like 15 minutes or 20 minutes of a movie.
Yeah, no, I get you. These and I wonder just because he's kind of emphasized so much that it's going to be very story driven, player choice. So I am hopeful that everything you said will come to pass, where it is going to be players interacting with the world, the
Yes.
stories, the characters, and all these other points. But we'll talk on more about story points in a little bit. I want to hop on to the next part of the
Yep.
did I actually cancel? No, I didn't. Hold on, it's right here. We'll talk about the next part, which is the Dawn era, which
Yep.
it's pretty interesting, and there's some important parts that happen here. So, several arc fleets reach the Centauri cluster, 16,000 years away from Earth. They discover hundreds of densely packed star systems with thousands of potentially habitable planets, and send out the Green World signal to some of the rest of the arc ships. Knowing it will take a millennia for the Green World signals to spread across the galaxy, these first arrivals slowly colonize the Centauri cluster, eventually establishing vast interstellar societies and empires. A slow but steady trickle of arc ships from Earth continues to arrive in Centauri, drawn by the Green World signal. The new arrivals struggle to find their place in a raw, unfamiliar galaxy, ultimately adapting and evolving like those before them or perishing. Now, looking into a little bit more of the details of this, what basically happened was humanity left Earth looking for new planets.
Yep.
Some people went left, some people went right, some people went up and down, and people were discovering new planets. However, when they reached the Centauri cluster, they realized that there was a chunk of this system that had multiple different planets. So not just like a solar system, but like an area that had multiple different solar systems. So once that happened, they sent the Green World signal to for the rest of the other arc ships to come through. In the arc ships themselves, the way that has worked is everyone's asleep. No, well, the majority of them are asleep.
Yeah.
So think of them as generational ships, right? So the technocrats will probably wake up, party for a year, I imagine, smash, do all those sexual things they want to do, and then they'll go back to sleep and say, yeah, what's up? One of the things we did see in the videos is that when it comes to some of the arc ships, necessity is needed, right? So
Yeah.
if somebody if an engineer, somebody who's important is about to pass away, and if you have that kidney that matches, even though you've paid your commission, you've paid to be on the ship, they will take you out and they will take your kidney potentially, and they'll probably get rid of you or divert resources away from your pod, which will eventually kill you, to the people who are more important. Of course, you can imagine a situation where, again, if you're a technocrat, the richer you are, you probably have more opportunities to survive. Whereas the more on the bottom you are, you will pass away. And this really reminded me of the Mass Effect books when we were going to Andromeda, where it is kind of
Yes.
based on this. And I thought that was really cool. Again, I'm reading this and I'm thinking, I want to know more. Listen, forget the game. I want to know more about how all these arc ships functioned and what kind of societies that they had potentially. And there was Starfield did a really good job at this. There was a mission where it was the arc ship mission, and it was telling you how these people had they were
Oh
born,
yes, I remember. Yeah, I
yeah,
remember that
they were
one.
born
Yeah.
on the ship.
That I
They
got
had to
to
live.
do. Yeah.
And there was a guy I spoke to, and he was about to pass away. And if you're an elderly person, you're almost expected to give up your life and just die. And there's no fight in it. So once again, there's so much lore, there's so much potential. I thought it was really, really cool. Anyways, what are your thoughts on the Green World signals? Because as simple as it is, it creates this very interesting dynamic where you have these people who have settled, and then hundreds of years later, you have these other people coming through, and you as a descendant looks at them very, very differently. Almost like, listen, like you guys are just coming in here with different cultures, different vibe. Yeah, my parents said, sent you guys the signal, but the truth is they shouldn't have. Because now you're coming here making this more complicated, maybe from a land perspective, maybe from a culture perspective, right? And we can apply some of that logic even in modern day society. Can you imagine a group of people who used to look like, who are just coming into a particular land saying, hey, we were invited. Like, yeah, you were invited several hundred years ago. Things have changed. Anyways, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, like I think we kind of experienced that. Like a group of people left, they came back, and then they colonized everything.
Hmm.
I mean, I mean that is essentially what it's. There's a lot of parallels between what happened. Like for instance, if you look at our own history, because that's exactly what happened. You
Hmm.
know, like a lot of humans left Africa where we all came from, and what was it like thousands of years, tens of no, it wasn't even thousands. It was hundred. No, it was about thousands of years, tens of thousands
Hmm.
of years. They develop in a new continent or new continents, and eventually we meet again, and we are now super different because you can imagine that the first Homo sapiens that left Africa all looked the same, and then when they come back, they now look completely different to what they were when they left. So I'm
Exactly.
assuming, because when I was reading the synopsis that you sent, in my understanding, aliens in this world are all just descendants of human beings, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So it's not a situation where they like with Andromeda they go to another galaxy and they find aliens that have developed completely separate or different.
No, not at all. It's
If
very it's
no,
very local.
so I love that, and the reason why is because I'm also a Dune fan. What I mean by Dune is that like not necessarily the movies or the books, but the games, like the old Dune games. That's like one of the first sort of like strategy games I played, and I loved the fact that like Dune goes into exploring that. What if we are the first species to become sentient? As a result, we will then populate the world with sentient lives. The only difference is that we will all evolve so differently that we will look at each other like aliens. So I love that concept, and I think that concept really um, sort of creates that tension to say, you know, the conflict is a conflict that's not based on people not understanding each other. It's fear based on the fact that they know that these people have capitalists. They have all these, these ills because we all come from the same species. They
Hmm.
don't want that, and like now, what they're doing is they probably by sending that signal out, you're just letting all those guys who are roaming the universe. Maybe they are the like for instance the capitalists that were left behind. I'm sure when they see that signal and they get there, they've not developed in the same harmonious way that those people have, and then that brings some interesting conflict into that and some tribalism as well, between all these human factions. So it's going to be interesting. So let me understand though, when this is all happening, where's your hero? Is this thousands of years before your hero?
No, no, no. This is all in time. Oh, sorry. No, this is way, way like it from a time perspective. I think we're talking about this from yeah, thousands of years ago. Like so, our hero is it could even be hundreds of thousands of years. I think it's just thousands.
Yeah.
But this is all history, and the best thing about this so far, and I think we'll touch about it, talk about it a little bit more in the future as well, is that there's so much that has happened from a time perspective. So think about it like Mass Effect, the rich history and lore. They've created a situation where they've said this is where things had started. We're all the way over here, and everything in between was drama, and so for example, there's civilizations that have risen and fallen. So you could look at it again from a Mass Effect point of view. You had the proteins, you had the all these other
Yes.
races. So they're kind of doing that where humans have evolved into so many different species,
Yes.
and these new species have created great technologies and they've died off for whatever reason. And even other human beings who have showed up, they've started to evolve as well, and then they died off. So
So
what? Go ahead.
sorry to interrupt you. So I just want to understand, like going back to the example, I think you made a brilliant example there in terms of like the history of Mass Effect, and that period. So what I'm trying to establish is, so when we are introduced to our hero, this event where, like for instance, everybody left with the arc ships has happened or occurred 50,000 years ago, for instance.
Yes, yes.
And now you guys are getting the signal from another arc ship elsewhere, and you are now answering it, and you're going to this place. Am
No,
I
no, no, no,
correct?
no, no. So the way it's happened here is there are still arc ships arriving uh, throughout the time. So an arc ship might have arrived 40,000 years ago, Another one
Yes.
arrived 30,000 years ago. Another one
Oh
arrived
yes.
20,000. So they're still coming. So in the book that I'm reading, and the book is actually based in the game, so it's similar to the game. An
Yeah.
archipel has just arrived, and these people are looking at everything that's so different. Like, wow, like what the hell is going on here? And they're adapting to the way that things are now done. So in the game, from what I understand with the story is like there's so many new dynasties that have been created, but in the game
Yes.
you are someone whose planet is being destroyed by some type of virus, some type of virus that was created by some ancient civilization that was used to be earthlings, and you're trying to find a technology that could cure your planet and save the people.
Oh.
So
So
now, so
okay.
you're traveling, trying to
Yeah.
find that technology, and you're basing it on remnant technology. The remnant technology is the period where everybody became super powerful, super strong, and a lot of races just got wiped out completely. So think about these remnant technology people as the proteins. You're looking for protein artifacts to save your people.
Yeah. Okay, so that makes sense, but like I just want to understand because there's these aliens that are like the ancients, right? Who settled this cluster or this area where this beacon was sent from, right? Am I
Hmm.
correct? They were there first. They were like there like thousands of years ago, tens of
Yes.
thousands, right? And
Hmm.
they don't like normal humans or the new humans coming in.
Sort of. So, to kind of expand onto this a little bit, there was a okay, well, it's actually the next part here, which is called the remnant era. So let me put that on
Yeah.
the screen.
Okay, so we'll
And
deal with that. Okay, no, it's fine.
yeah,
We'll talk about that day.
yeah,
So no, I just wanted to understand like where everyone is in the universe because even if I just look at like the technologies, some technology looks very familiar. It's got like that what is it, NASA punk look to it,
that's
and
a
then
point five. Yeah.
some looks very alien. Like so
Hmm.
you can tell that there's semblance of humanity there. These people used to be human,
Yeah.
but everything else that they use, like their weapons, their technology, their way of travel, all those things look very, very alien to like me and you, for instance. So I noticed
Mhm.
that difference between. But no, no, I think that's a very good approach for world building. And depending upon where they bring you in and where you fit in within that scope, it's really going to give you a lot of because even like I know they even said something I don't know if it was from the video that I watched of yours or I read it,
Mhm.
but there was a mention of the fact that choices that you make before you leave your galaxy or your planet, when you come back thousands of years, because of the time dilation aspect of it, those choices will have now taken full fruition and affect your world,
Yes. Correct.
which is pretty exciting.
Yeah. So the timeline is actually rise of Aslan dynasty. So it's around 41,000 years later. Well, right now
Oh,
we're in
okay.
the remnant era, right? So the remnant era, as to where we are right now, I think it's around 24,000 years. But during the dawn era, so for around maybe I think it was 15,000 years later, or whatever. So humanity began to to change, and the reason why this is also possible is just because, like I told you, back on Earth, we're already modifying genetics. We're already
Yes.
doing this, right? We're already playing with animal genetics as well. Awakening them. Um, so it gets to the point where we start to divert. We start to be very different. We start to this group of people start to do certain things with their bodies. Other people start to do certain other things with their bodies. Maybe in one particular country, there is no such thing as he or she anymore. Everyone's just a they, right? And then eventually, it's more cyberpunk like, where you have men who have female body parts, etc., etc., etc. So the cultures change so much,
Yeah.
and everyone becomes so different. And I believe it's that difference that actually causes more wars. Not just the lack of resources, but it's that difference that causes problems, because now we're not even similar anymore. And if we're fighting each other when we're similar back on Earth as human beings, imagine somebody who looks entirely
Yeah.
completely different from you, right? Somebody who speaks a completely different language, and people who have completely different values to you.
Yeah.
And that's how we get into the remnant era. So Centauri's early history is marked by the violent rise and fall of interstellar empires. With the aid of genetic engineering, the citizens of these constantly warring cultures rapidly change and evolve. Over thousands of years, the descendants of the original colonists splinter into dozens of divergent species. Collectively, these transhuman beings call themselves celestials. As various celestial factions expand via dominance over the Centauri cluster, entire star systems are transformed into factories that generate trillions of weapons and war machines. Violence between rival celestial empires culminates in the Formation Wars, obliterating hundreds of habitable worlds across the cluster. Arc ships, drawn by the green signals, continue to arrive during this era, with the human inhabitants relegated to small backwater worlds by the more technological advanced celestial factions. So at this point, it seems, apart from just genetic engineering, war is war is probably the biggest boost in technology that most people receive. Hey, John Wolf, how you doing, man? We're just talking Exodus from the new game from Archetype Studios, James Olsen. Looking forward to it. And what are your thoughts? Anyways, we've been talking about just the history, so we're kind of going through some lore things. But if you have any questions, let us know. So back on the point, yes. So the Celestials are very, very different from human beings because, and I think it's war, right? If you look at some of the best technologies or technology advancements, it's because of war. It's because nations want to build something crazy, something cool to advance themselves or to take out their opponents. And as an officer, you end up creating technologies that the human beings can use. I think somebody mentioned the internet as well was sponsored by the government. Listen, we got to space because of this idea of using rockets to blow up other people, and then using those scientists to then take us to space from a competitive point of view. So all this to me just makes perfect sense. And if you take that foundation and you expand over 20,000 years with wars, because this wars went on for quite a long time, I expect the Celestials to be extremely different, and I expect some of them to eventually get wiped out, which is also crazy because these guys, they want planets, and because of the war that they're engaging in, they're literally destroying glass in these planets, which reminds me of listen, if we as human beings go to war over territory and then we drop nuclear bombs on it, well, that land is now useless. So it got to the point where these guys are very, very destructive. And as a normal human being arriving, and then you see these Celestials who are not really human anymore destroying viable planets because they're at war, it must be it's such a unique situation to be in. You can't offer assistance, you can't offer weapons or technology because you're nobody. But one thing that the humans did have is they were good at mining resources, so they were like essentially slave labor to these guys. Anyways, what are your thoughts on the Remnant era, where massive amounts of civilizations grew and fell?
Again, I'm gonna also just refer to like what this sounds like to me. It sounds very similar to like what happens in June when they call it the scattering day, when all these human races or these human species all sort of like diverged and everybody went in a different direction, and we mentioned genetic modification for a lot of because in the June universe there is no AI, so a lot of the technology has to be based around human excellence. So, like for instance, all the computers in the June universe, all the mathematicians, everything is done by humans. So they had to genetically develop humans to be able to be literally walking computers, with the sole function, some of them of doing such complicated mathematics that they literally can open wormholes in space and stuff like that. So I like this because this sounds like very familiar to me in terms of like they've chosen to go that direction where humanity is not one thing and then the aliens are something else. All the conflict stems from the fact that we've taken all the stuff that we have here on Earth, all the issues, all the conflict, or actually we are evolving throughout the galaxy in the same way we evolved on the Earth. So there's a lot of parallels in every single thing
You know what?
that.
Listen, when you mentioned the fact that like they've created human computers,
Yeah.
they have something similar here, right? So I'm not listen. I think these guys were a fan of Dune because it seems like they're pulling some stuff, from Dune, which is okay because I'm listen. Like I
I
think
mean,
Dune is a
yeah.
great book, and but I think a lot of people, even sci-fi fans, haven't really delved into it too much. So to a lot of people, this probably is going to be new. Even Mass Effect, when I heard about the Reapers and situation, I was like, "Oh,
Yeah.
this is great." Then I went to go read Alistair Reynolds' books from the past, and I was like,
Yeah.
"This is Reapers, like
Yeah,
robots that
exactly.
come to destroy you." Like this, is even there was this show, this fantasy show, with this girl on Netflix that got canceled recently. Fire or something. I can't remember the name that lose me right now. But I was watching it with some of my friends, and one of the guys was like, "Oh, this is like Dragon Age, the copying Dragon Age," and I was like, I doubt the copying Dragon Age." And
I think I know which show you're talking about. Yeah.
yeah, he mentioned it, and then in the end, I was like, "Well, let's see which book came out first. Did the book come out first, or did Dragon Age come out first? The book came out first,
Yeah, of
So,
course.
but
Of
listen, like
course.
it's fine. I think it's all about how you execute the story. So the
Excuse
Remnant
me.
era really, really interesting as well.
Mm.
And this is something that is tricky for me, right? Because when I think about not Mass Effect, when I think about Starfield, the the wars that occurred, it seemed extremely interesting. And even in Halo Infinite, the wars that occurred in, that seemed extremely
Mm.
interesting. But then the game makes you play when everything's peaceful. And I'm thinking, look at that
Yeah.
Starfield, like,
No, but
wait, why? Even the same thing
yeah.
for Halo Infinite. I was like, wait, why is that like this shit you're saying sounds way cooler than what the hell I'm doing right now? So the Remnant era seems like such an interesting place to be in, and it doesn't have to
Yeah.
be like, oh, we're at the start of the war. It could be like the war's coming to a close, but there's still a lot of battles going on between multiple different factions. And
Yeah.
so how does humanity play a role in that? And I think that was a huge potential. Well, I'm not saying this to down the game or this depends on whatever stories they tell, in the current era. But this as a backdrop for story sounds extremely intriguing.
And the only thing is that they just need to be careful is that, especially when you have dense lore, right? If you have like a universe that's got a lot of dense lore, there's a lot of religions, there's a lot of factions, there's a lot of group. You know what makes Dune? Because Dune is basically Star Wars. I mean, George Lucas is on record saying that he did rip off Dune in terms of some of the ideas that are central there. But the difference is Dune is not very accessible because Dune feels more like a religious epic than it does a sci-fi, adventure, if that makes sense, like Star Wars. There's so many involved things in Dune in terms of the different houses and whatever. It's very political. It's very religious. It's all about prophecy. It becomes so convoluted that it becomes inaccessible for most people that are not into the law. So I hope that's the one thing that they do with this is that the moment to moment sort of interaction or the moment to moment or short term storytelling is gripping enough that it makes you interested in all this world, building stuff.
Well, it's Drew Kasparian that's gonna be working on that. So if we trust him, if we trust his expertise, then I think we should get that.
Yeah,
Or at
no.
least my hope is we get that.
Hmm.
But the Remnant era really interesting again because I think they've done a great job in creating aliens. I said this some time ago that Starfield was good when it came to a diverse group of factions, and but I always felt Aliens makes a game because you can go so wild and so different. And what
Mm.
Excess has basically done is we don't have aliens, but we have human beings who's transformed, and the Celestials are very, very advanced that they look down on humanity. And then it makes you ask an important question is, how different are the Celestials from a technological or even mental standpoint from humanity?
Mm.
And have they modified their genes so much that the difference is even larger than human beings to chimps? And if that answer is correct, should we be surprised that they look down on us? Because we look down on our cousins. We look down onto
That's true.
chimps, jellyfishes. Like, we eat them, we do things with them. We don't care about them. So why should the Celestials care about us? And I think that's a very interesting question that should be answered, or a question that they should raise in the actual in the story. Will they do it? Who knows? But once again, so much potential here.
I don't think you can avoid not answering that question. I think
Mhm.
you have to address that, and that to me it's a great starting point for the central conflict,
Mhm.
because it's very similar to how the Protheans saw us. I mean, whenever you talk to what's his name,
Javik.
Javik, he talks about the fact that you guys were like food to them, like
Yeah.
you were like.
Solarian liver was good. Best served raw, apparently.
That's the thing. So, so this to me is great because I hope they make them a little bit mysterious and that we don't know everything about these Celestials from the onset, and we get to learn more about their part in the universe and what their grand plan or their grand moral is, or what's driving them versus us. I mean, it's obvious why they hate us, because they probably see like some you know a part of them that they've outgrown, that they don't that they've evolved beyond. But yeah, I'm gonna be very interested to see how, like, in terms of your character, what choices do they give you to respond, or
Mhm.
to sort of like, how do you feel about this? Where do you stand? And who are you going to have in your team? Maybe a celestial or two, or whatever the situation is, and how are they gonna then affect the dynamic of that story?
Yeah. As I said, potential. I'm looking forward to some of these answers too. So let's move on to the Crucible era. So just as soon as the Remnant era was done, the Crucible era started. And the Crucible era, you can almost look at, like, once again, if you're looking at Alistair Reynolds' books, you can kind of see the similarities here, because, once the Reaper situation was happening, it was actually the aliens of the Alistair Reynolds books that created their version of the Reapers, to kind of keep everyone in check. But the Crucible era, 30,000 AD. In the 30,000 AD, yes. In the aftermath of the Formation Wars, a powerful celestial species called the Elohim rise to prominence. The Elohim constructed the gates of heaven, an interstellar network linking all the systems of Centauri, heralding in a new age of exploration and trade. As the unchallenged power in Centauri, the Elohim usher in 5,000 years of peace and prosperity. They establish unbreakable laws, including a ban of destruction of habitable worlds, the galaxy's most precious resource. The Elohim eventually recede from the galactic stage. New celestial empires rise up to fill the void, expanding their territory and influencing through diplomacy, trade, and military might. The ultimate fate of the Elohim is unknown, yet the remaining celestial empires continue to obey their laws for fear of potentially catastrophic retribution should they violate them. In addition to building the gates of heaven, the Elohim also used their hyper advanced technology to move hundreds of habitable planets to completely new systems. Among those was Ledon, a moon placed into close proximity orbits around a gas giant in Malakabel's system. So this part was also good and interesting. These guys rise to prominence, and basically they kind of maybe try to do what the not the proteins, the guys in the apex predators. What are they called again? The apex
Um, Apex Predators
in Mass
in
Effect. The first guys who created Reapers.
the Leviathan.
The Leviathan, yeah. So,
Yeah,
the Elohim become powerful. They're strong. They're, everyone has to
yeah.
follow their rules. They've wiped out the other competition. So everyone is slightly below them now. And the Elohim basically just said, we're going to, give you guys rules to follow. And this is one of the reasons why everyone believes that's that the wars stopped here, right? Simply because when the Elohim improve trade. So now you can reach another region faster. So now you can do the resources, and I think they're almost touching on this idea of like the European Union, right? Europe is going to war with each other
Yeah.
continuously due to resources. But hey, how about we just focus on trade? Well, how about we build roads, trains, ships that lets me go to you, and whatever resources you have, you sell to me. I sell you my resources. That everybody actually starts to work together, and this to me just seems like that moment right there. This was that moment of them after World War II, where it was like, we can't keep doing this. Like, we really, like, do I really need to take over your country? Do I really need to destroy you just to make money? Well, how about we just work together? And that's their moment right there. I don't have any side point on this really, because for the people in the story, this is all history as well. Like, all this is like new to them. Not new to
Yeah.
them, but this is their history too. Like, you go to the museum and this is what they're seeing too. So any questions on this part?
My only question is like, so they talk about like, okay, so these guys, the Elohim, they were responsible for all this era of like, oh, this golden age where like things were going well, and they put a system in place that works, and there was no war. But I'm very curious as to, so they say that they just disappeared. Did they exist in a very specific? Because I would assume that the Elohim were one of many groups that were there that time, or was it a situation that everyone that was born at that time was part of that Elohim group? So that's how everyone disappeared.
Disappeared. Trying to, what do you mean by disappear? As in, did they get wiped out? Did they leave
But
willingly?
isn't that what they say most? Like that they disappeared like without.
Yeah, nobody knows what happened to them.
But my question is, if were they one of 20 races, for instance, during that time, or did they unite everyone and everyone become like the
No,
Elohim?
no, 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 no. So the Elohim, you can almost look at them as, let's say, they were the Solarians, right? So they rose up. The
Mm-hmm.
Solarians are, now they're kind of rulers of the galaxy. They've set up how they've set the rules. But the Solarians have, or the Elohim have their own planets, and you would maybe see their ships, you would see them doing things, but at some points everybody starts to retreat. So you can almost think about it like
So they
it,
left. They were not wiped out.
no, they were not. Well, we don't really know. I mean, so when they say they retreated from galactic space, we don't know why they retreated from galactic space. Could it be because they wanted to colonize other locations? Could it be because they wanted to wanted to go to Andromeda? Or could it be they actually transcended and became, what is it? They went into the 4D space. So this part is
Yeah.
very open to whatever happens. All we
Okay.
know is that these guys was up and left, right? But you need to kind of look at it in the sense that, like, the Elohim were the, don't look at them necessarily as celestials on an equivalent standing with everyone else. Think of them as a higher form of celestials. So they could even be seen as like gods to some of these people, right?
Oh, okay. I see. So
So
when they disappear, they don't have to sort of like. It's not something that you have to understand. So they sort of show up,
exactly.
and then they. Okay,
Yeah, yeah,
that
like,
makes.
you could even, like, I mean, once again, if we look at it from a different point of view, if monkeys or donkeys or cows or whatever, if they know we are humanity, they understand us. And if we at some
Yeah.
point decide to just leave this planet and just go,
Yeah.
they wouldn't know where we went. They would just know that, like, yo, there used to be these guys who used to take care of us, do this for us. Now they've
Yeah.
just gone. So they don't know where we've gone to
Okay.
Mars. They don't know where we've gone to a different country. So I would say think about it like that. At least that's my
Yeah.
speculation.
Okay, that makes sense. No, so that was my only question. Is that like because it sounded like what these guys were effectively were like the, not even the Leviathan, because the Leviathan we know were killed by the
The
Reapers, the
Reapers.
machines. So we understand what happened to them, but it feels more like these guys were like the Protheans using technology that they'd gained before to advance that current or their current empire. The only difference is with the Protheans, of course, they built one empire,
Mhm.
and as a result, when they were defeated, the whole empire fell because it was all centrally run, or it was one central thing.
Mhm.
So this is going to be interesting because I really would like to just have an understanding that like, but the way that they painted here, what you're saying makes sense. That the Elohim were probably far higher in terms of like the hierarchy in terms of
Yeah.
with they were like the Not even the Asari, because the Asari were not that far
Well,
superior
you see,
to.
I think I would actually say the Elohim were pretty much the Leviathans. The only difference is they didn't create a robot to go wipe out and kill themselves. The Leviathans,
Okay.
they were the apex, they were in charge, and then at some point the Leviathan said, "Oh, let's go to Andromeda, or let's do something else, or
Yeah.
let's just
Okay,
go to
that makes
4D
sense.
space, or let's just chill and hide, and let's just see what happens with these guys." And then you had the weaker celestials come up and say, okay, you know what, now we're in charge because, oh, not in charge per se, like we're not going to break the laws, but like, we're more powerful now, so we're going to take over. But the key thing to remember is even the new celestials, they don't want to rock, they don't want to mess with the Elohim because they understand how
Yeah.
powerful they were. That's why they still respect their laws. This is why I say like you guys
Uh,
are like gods to them. So they understand like if the Elohim comes
okay.
back, they could wipe you out very quickly, and then your,
Yeah,
your
man.
your whole dynasty is gone. So they're very much to me more like the actual
The
you could say
Leviathan.
the Leviathans, or if you're gonna say the proteins, at least what the proteins were in their cycle to what the
Yes.
humanity and the
Yes.
Asaris were. So we were just nothing to them. So the
Yeah.
Asaris saw the proteins as gods. So this is a higher level of celestial.
Oh, okay. No, that makes sense. No, I think that example really clears that up for me. And that's very interesting. Because then the question would be, because again, like a lot of this, I can tell this is a lot of Drew Karpyshyn's writing, because there's a lot of
Mhm.
parallels in terms of like some of the concepts. Like for instance, I wonder if these Elohim didn't disappear into some form of dark space, or to your point, 4D, whatever reality. But
Yeah.
yeah, so I see. Okay, I get it. But I wonder then if there's an enemy that they're aware of that we're not aware of, or we'll see.
Well, there is something. So far, the game there's no aliens in the game. However, there are
Mm,
alien things that have been found that has allowed humanity to some members of humans, if they survive, to become a type of
yeah.
hybrid of an alien. We can probably touch on that a different day, or maybe even if we get to it
Mm,
now. But so the last part of the story, when it comes to the sources, this is more present day. This is the
uh-huh.
rise of the Aslan dynasty. A long-lost human art fleet arrives in Malak Bell system and establishes a colony on the moon of Lydon, building atop ruins left behind by a long-extinct celestial civilization called the Detinier. After 2 centuries of struggling to survive, a human traveler named Orion Aslan emerges as Lydon's leader and savior. Born in 2328, Aslan rises from a simple mercenary to become a legendary traveler and a hero
Uh-huh.
on Ledon, venturing out into space on numerous Exodus missions in search of advanced celestial technology to elevate Ledon's technology. Orion establishes the Aslan dynasty, a powerful network of loyal followers to rule over his homeworld during his long absence among the stars. Orion celebrates the birth of his perfect heir, June Aslan, the genetically created with both celestial and human DNA. Shortly after, Orion embarks on the final exodus, never to return. Gideon Aslan, June's half-brother, seizes control of the dynasty and declares himself ruler of Ledon, forcing June, a still mere child, to go into hiding. I believe June is you in the game.
Okay, so
Um,
this is where you come in. Then this is
yes.
your
You
dynasty.
are, yeah, you're a dynasty, you're the kind of king. So one thing that's really important here is that because so this is not like, oh, we're looking for protein technology, we find there's multiple different proteins. There's technology of even advanced civilizations from the
Mm,
proteins. So if you find that technology, that remnant technology, you could actually, take your species from Planet of the Apes to to
yeah.
cyberpunk, just like that. So these remnant technologies are very valuable. Some of them are very dangerous to also get because there's maybe traps, there's horrors unknown.
Mm,
But yeah, it's all about trying to find the right technology to advance your species or your human group. And I think something else that's interesting is because we know that humanity was arriving at different parts of the timeline, and
uh-huh.
those humans who actually looked at the celestials eventually became celestials themselves. So the
Uh-huh.
question is, as a human who's just arrived now in 45 AD, do you have fear that we actually going to become like these guys too, given time? in 30,000 years too, we will ourselves become celestials. So that's another interesting question.
I mean, does evolution work like that though? Like, unless you are genetically manipulating your your essence, because like that's like you being of African descent landing in Europe. It's not you're because of evolution that took place, like let's say thousands or tens or thousands before. It doesn't mean that your skin complexion is going to just gradually start changing, and your hair texture, and that sort of evolution. And again, it's we understand, like like that it happened, but how it happened, we still don't get it. So I think if the worry is that you are going to change yourself as a species using the technology you find, then it's valid. But I don't think it's going to be a natural occursion.
What I think the natural part, I think it's a combination of both, right? So the natural part and the technology part, as you say, because you can see a situation where you have now arrived at a planet that has high gravity. Well, there's no advantage to being 6'5" or 6'6". People who are short and stocky are going to be the preference. So survival of the fittest says, you are going to be the leaders of this, or you're going to be at an advantage. So that's the first thing. But if you were talking about planets that have different complete biomes, because if you think about it, humanity, the reason, like, what separates an African from an Aborigine or a European, or an Asian person, like, we look very different, but that's in the same planet. So what if, you had taken an African, one of these Africans, and you and his brother migrated to Asia and then became Asian. But you take that African, you put him on Mars. Well, how does it look like? Because it's a whole different chemistry now, right? It's different types of food, different
No,
types
no,
of.
no. I agree with you. I get what you're saying. The only thing I'm putting into question there is that, like, there's already people, like, for instance, there's already celestials there, right? These guys just arrived. They look like us. They don't look like celestials, right? So in that situation, like, for instance, when Europeans showed up here, let's say 1,000 years ago, they didn't, like, after generations of sort of being in this atmosphere, even though, like, they didn't change overnight, right? And the main thing here that I see is that when you, like, because there's two ways of exploring. It's the same thing with, like, the mass. Let me use actually mass. It's going to be easier to use Mass Effect as an example. Just because you move to a planet and you live with Krogans and the current universe, you're not going to change into a Krogan, or you're not going to adapt or readapt to a Krogan, because again, you're not in a position where it's natural selection that's changing you. It's your own genetic manipulation, because you are at that level. You're no longer dependent on nature to make those decisions for you. So
Yes.
you can inhabit a world that has no gravity. You can inhabit a world that's just in the oceans. But the thing is, because you've advanced to have technology like suits that protect you, you can control gravity in certain aspects. You don't have to live in liquid water. You can still create spaces under the ocean within that water. So you have now sort of, like, what's the word? To protect yourself from the outside, world. You've it's escaping me now, but you've insulated yourself from the effects of the environment. So the only thing that will make you evolve to look like the current species would be genetic. Do you agree?
Yes. No, I agree. No, you're right. Because I mean, we're already doing it now, right?
Yes.
There are people who are surviving who really probably shouldn't be, and obviously that's down to um, people who can't think straight, people who can't walk straight,
Yeah.
whatever, and we take care of them and we give them medicine.
Yes,
So
you're
we
right.
succumb the environmental factor
100%.
of it. We've created cities where lions and bears can just interfere and just kill people.
Yes,
So
exactly.
yeah, you're 100% right. It is going to be down to modification of ourselves. And like, listen, if you're celestial, if you're a human being and the celestial is giving you technology to make your life better, you're gonna take it. And I think
Yeah.
there might be some pushback from some people, but I was chatting to a friend about this, and it was completely different. He's very like, we need to just stick to ourselves, and we can't be relying on migration and people and resources from different countries. And he's like, we love consumerism too much. And I said, yeah, but because we always want to improve. We went from radios to black and white TVs to color TVs. Then I remember like using the first digital television ever. How I could now like just move around with the button and pick what I wanted to watch. Like we always want to improve. Look at mobile phones as well. Look at using Siri. There's no situation where any human being necessarily just wants to stay static. So when the celestial, we find some kind of technology that helps us live longer, that helps us improve, helps us helps us to be smarter. We're gonna take it, and if you don't take it, you get left behind. So in the book, from a genetic point of view, they're human beings who are genetically making themselves smarter. So in the book I'm reading, one of the guys
Yeah.
says to his daughter, like, "Why do you think you're so good at maths? You think you just woke up and just liked it? No, it's because I implemented that into you before you were born. So you make decisions. The reason why you're the leader is not just because you were born a leader. It's because I made you into
Yeah.
a leader. I literally gave you the traits to make you to a leader. You are still yourself, but you have these additional things that has changed you
Yeah.
fundamentally. So who knows? Maybe if I didn't do nothing, you'd have been a football player, a basketball player. But because I did this to you, you're now the leader of this empire.
Yeah.
You make good decisions. You're now the CEO.
So they build in the education so that you don't have to. So from birth, you already have the inherent skill set or the beginnings of the skill set, so that you develop in that way.
Oh yeah, I mean, if you have the money, yeah, sure,
Yeah.
because the guy who was saying this, he was one of these billion and trillionaire technocrats kind
Yeah.
of guys, right? So the
But
average
again,
person does not.
but again, this sounds very much like the Elusive Man and Miranda and Miranda's father, and the fact that she's completely in on Earth. This is very similar to Star Trek. So on Earth, genetic modification has been made illegal in Star Trek, and I believe in Mass Effect as well. It's illegal to genetically modify human beings,
Hmm.
which is like why who's this? And you have this conversation in Mass Effect 2 with Miranda, and she sort of explains to you, and then you sort of ask her, well, isn't this illegal? And she says, well, yeah, the father worked for Cerberus, so they don't care.
It is what it is.
Yeah, but like, so it's to me again, like I see a lot of like tricklings there of like Drew's work on Mass, which is good. This is all good stuff. This is all his stuff. These are all ideas to me that I think he wanted to really explore when they were making Mass Effect 2 and they were about to start 3. But because of the fact that EA wanted it to be an action game, they sort of abandoned a lot of these, like, sort of trees of thought that could have led to these different, expansions to the universe.
Yeah, no, you're right. And I think one thing about sci-fi is like, this is why I think I prefer sci-fi to fantasy, because every single concept is just based on reality as opposed to like some kind of fiction. Everything you said there is plausible, and the reason why all these stories can have similar concepts is because it is plausible. Like these are
Yeah.
stories. This is not like if somebody didn't come up with it, somebody else would have came up with it because the way society moves. These are all plausible actions. In terms of excitement and what you'd expect, I am very much in. And we'll talk about time dilation in a second, and how that affects gameplay. But James Olsen has always said that, listen, Wizards of the Coast came to me. I was retired. I was burnt out from the industry, and they came to me. I didn't go to them, and they said, "We want you to come back out of retirement to make a game." And he said, "One, I'm only going to do it if I can do what I want." And they said,
Yeah.
"No problem. Here you go." Then he said, "Well, I want to hire who I want." So Drew and whoever else, and they said, "Yeah, whatever." Now these guys could have been expensive, but they were like, "No, do whatever the hell you want to do." Third, they were like, he said, "You know what, Wizards of the Coast, you guys, Baldur's Gate, you guys are fantasy. You came to me clearly because I am the father of Dragon Age. I am Neverwinter's Nights. I am, all these things. You want me to make you a fantasy game, the same lane as Baldur's Gate. I don't want to do that. I want to go into sci-fi. Is that a problem?" They said, "Do whatever you want to do." And in the interview, he says the relationship is the best he's ever had with a publisher. That they just literally, they don't even they don't care. They don't even go into the details. Like he just does whatever he wants to do, and he just gives them updates. And then he mentioned how they just giving me all this money and just said, "Yeah, have had a boss. So I think when this game comes out, it's gonna be if it fails, I really want to hear the publisher sucks. I don't want to hear they're trying to appeal to modern audience.
I think when this game comes out, that will be done. We will be not having that conversation.
Maybe done because I'm sure they might have pronouns in it, but I really want people to understand that like the guy who's making this game is like, this is all me, man. I'm the one creating this. So, and I'm really happy to hear that this is just him, no publishers. Now, with that being said, if the game does really well, they'll be like, "Yeah, see, we told you, the publishers don't get involved. You're gonna get an amazing game." It's just one of those things. But I'm really happy that this is all him and this is all Drew. What are your thoughts on that? Knowing that that Wizards have given these guys free reign to do whatever they want.
So, just a quick question. So, when is the estimated drop date of this game?
They haven't announced it yet. It's actually it could be 2025. They just haven't announced it yet.
Ain't no way. When did they start developing this?
Oh, I mean, the studio was created in, I think, 2018.
Jeez. So that gives them how many years? Like 4? Yes, we're in 2025. So that's about the same amount of time that Baldur's Gate 3 was developed, right?
Well, let me see. Archetype Entertainment is an American video game. Sorry, it was created in 2019. Yes.
So they started working on this probably around then. So it's about 6 years.
Yep.
Okay. So
this is also why I think like because it's very rare. Like if you create a studio company and you tell them like, "Oh, okay, I'll give you a game in like 7 years," no shareholder wants to hear that kind of nonsense. They're like, what's going on here? Like 4 years, bro. Like drop this shit now.
Yeah. No. Like then that's good. Then okay, that means that.
Hey, Raichi says, "Let them cook." It's good to see you.
What's up, Raichi? So, like, if I hear what you're saying, it will probably come out in 2026. That's the earliest I expected. If we get in 2025, then this is definitely my most anticipated game for 2025, because in the sci-fi genre, to be honest with you, it's only older games that still fascinate me. I mean, like, I'm not a Space Marine guy. I don't get the lore. I think it's interesting for what it is, but if you had to give me an option between Space Marine and Gears, I'll take Gears any day, because I understand that world and that lore much more than the Space Hammer world. It's a bit too much for me. But like besides that, like there's not a lot of games that you get yearly that are sci-fi, if you think about it, like really, really good sci-fi, especially role-playing games. Like role-playing games, we've seen like a resurgence, but there's not a lot of role-playing or turn-based role-playing games with sci-fi themes or futuristic themes. The last one I can remember that was turn-based is XCOM, which came out like almost 7 years ago now. So I'm really looking forward to this, and I hope it's what we all expect it to be, which is a richer, more evolved version, or a growth from what we expect from Mass Effect, or what we wanted Mass Effect to sort of develop into. But yeah, so the only thing is, excuse me, again, I've seen a lot of like elements of the game. I'm just wondering what they're going to choose as perspective. Is it going to be linear, like Mass Effect, the original trilogy, or is it going to be more open world? Which again, in a big galaxy, for your first game, I would just say stick to the basics. Make it as as linear with biomes as possible, because then it's easy to focus in on the story elements, and then you don't have to end up in a situation like Starfield, where you are now trying to procedurally generate 1,000 worlds with the same sort of like predefined actions and things. I hope that there's a lot of really, really well crafted story and world, because they have to go hand to hand. Because the moment you have well crafted characters, but the world is just this void, or it's just this big place where nothing really matters, then what do we get there? Like, where do we go? Like, you get Starfield. So yeah, I hope it's handcrafted and everything feels lived in, and
I have
the
some
bar.
information on that actually. But just before that, Rachie says Gears of War is a copy of Space Marines. I'm never gonna lie. When I saw Space Marines 2, I was like, yeah, this looks like Gears of War to me. But someone told me that
It
was
is.
correct. But I was like, nah, this looks like Gears of War. It really does. It's just different palettes.
No, but Rach is right. But I'm just saying that like I still prefer Gears over Space Marine, because the problem with like the whole Warhammer thing is that it is such a overexposed franchise. Like there's so many different games. There's so many different stories. There's so many. There's just it's a universe that to me just exhausts me just by thinking about sort of joining it.
Mhm.
Like, what's the first thing that you're going to buy? You're gonna go buy Space Marine 1, which was also a well, not a spin-off, but it was part of the world based on the board game, based on other things.
Yeah, no, I get you. Yeah, no, I understand that. XCOM 2 has already been out 8 years. It has, and I heard from
Yes, I was talking about yeah, that's the one I was
the
referring to.
people have said
XCOM 2.
like for some reason like no one has been able to beat XCOM 2, and no one knows why. I'm guessing the studio might decide to make an XCOM 3 at some point. But yeah, that's Archetype Studios. Let's talk a little bit more about the some bullet points such as time dilation and what is unique about Exodus. So unique things about Exodus to me would be the fact that it's in a whole new universe, which is good, and I think that they've done a really good job at establishing the lore so far. Now the execution might be a little bit different, but personally for me, I think like I'm reading the book, going over the details, and I'm really impressed with what they've done here. They've kind of created like a blank slate, and I think because there's so many different civilizations that have been extinct that you as a human might find something interesting, but it's also very much possible that another human being finds something different that might overtake you, right? So but yeah, hold on real quick. It says the best part to the start of Warhammer 40k is the Cepheus Chain novel or audio book. Just like Exodus, I'm reading the audiobook, and I'm telling you, it's really something special.
I'll check that out, Rachie. Thanks.
I have some. Let's go into time dilation and how that actually affects things. So, time dilation is related to the theory of relativity. My pronunciation is all over the place.
As it
Basically, it just says like if you move closer to the speed of light, time for you will be very different than everyone else. So one of the best examples of this is when if you were to watch Interstellar, Coop gets closer to the black hole. What happens is a day on that planet becomes like whatever 10 years or 5 years or so, to everyone else who's outside of that field of gravity, and that's what they're doing here. They're making sure that time dilation is a key concept in the actual hook of the game and the storytelling. So some notes here is in the upcoming video game Exodus, the concept of time dilation isn't just a narrative hook. It's a revolutionary gameplay mechanic that could redefine player engagement and storytelling in video games. There's long-term consequences. Time dilation in Exodus means that in-game decisions have repercussions that might not be immediately visible but could unfold over decades or centuries. This long-term perspective adds a layer of consequences to player choices, making each decision more significant as players see the evolution of societies, relationships, and personal lives that they've influenced. I'll give you a few key points. I want to hear your thoughts on it. How do you think that would affect relationships between like family members and people, and how do you think that relationship can also affect societies as well?
Jeez, it's gonna depend on the execution, how it's done, and they haven't really shown us. Like I've seen some key concepts, in some of the trailers, but they haven't really shown us. They've spoken about it, but they've not like given us an example where maybe you make a decision on planet A, you go to planet B, and then all of a sudden they show you showing up years later, and then all of a sudden, things either have developed completely different, or the maybe like there's enemy factions that are angry at you for decisions you made when you left that
Hmm.
weren't there when you left. So I'm not sure how they're going to approach that. It sounds like it's a very interesting concept. What I would be interested in is actually what I wanted to ask you when you started talking about it. Is this going to be like their Mass Effect thing, their hook? Like by Mass Effect, I mean like, is this gonna be like their Mass Effect field, which generates like, for instance, biotic powers, etc., etc.? Is this the equivalent of that?
Time dilation or
The
what?
time dilation that they're talking about in gameplay.
No, 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 no. When it comes to gameplay, the time dilation is just specifically about how you make player choices, right?
So it
So
doesn't relate to the
no, 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 no,
moment
doesn't
to
really,
moment. You
no,
can't
no,
really
no,
like maybe slow down things if you see what I'm like. Yeah, is
no,
there
no,
no?
no, be able to do that.
Because what I would think, what would be an interesting idea, and I hope they play with this, because I've not seen anything. I've seen like the people do things in the trailers, but I don't know where that or what. Like for instance, this dude that just did the thing with the arm.
Yeah,
I don't know what technology he's using to do that. Maybe he's regrowing his arm or he's de-aging his arm. So that
mm,
was my thinking, is that when they talk about this time dilation and the fact that it's going to have bearings on the story, that it might also have bearings on the
the
moment-to-moment
gameplay.
gameplay.
Yeah, you're right in the sense that I've seen some cool concepts like that. I imagine that would just be technological, and not anything to do with actual time. But yeah, no, good catch. But no, this is specifically just like
It's for
how do we
story.
think for story. I think from a relationship point of view, you in a situation where they've mentioned how if you have daughters, for example, in the game,
Oh.
that if you then made that decision to go somewhere or something was to happen, just like Coop in Interstellar, that you come back and your daughter would
Mm.
be, now 45 years old,
Okay.
older than you. So the question is, is she resentful that you left? Has she changed who she is now?
Uh,
Is she a bad person? Is she a good person? Like, what decisions did you make, and how did you leave her
yeah.
to with the right resources and people around her to ensure that she's a successful leader, for example? From a society point of view, it could be as simple as well as, hey, I found this technology that's great. Who do I give it to? Do I give it to this person who seems
Yes.
competent, or this person who doesn't seem competent? So like another example would just be Mass Effect again, where maybe you've decided to allow the Quarians to create robots, and yeah, create the robots, have a good time. They'll help you, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Come back, and the Quarians are wiped out because the Geth has, killed them. Or maybe even the Genophage. You make that decision to cure the Genophage, and then you go, you leave, you come back, and the Quarians are taking over the galaxy. So I think there's a lot of
Yeah.
there's a lot of these stories that you can actually see the instant effect straight away, and I think that's such a very important, interesting mechanic. When I decided to save the Krogans, sorry, to kill them, um, that effect you're not gonna see it until Mass Effect 4 or 5 or whenever it
Of
is.
course. Yes.
This
Yeah.
game is saying like, no, 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 you can see it in the next 30 minutes. Just
So
just hop on that ship, time dilation, and here you go.
as long as they don't make it obvious,
Mhm.
like for instance, because when you have such complex mechanics on paper, they sound great. But if that mechanic is applied the way, like for instance, some of the choice mechanics were applied in Veilguard, then it's pointless. Like if it's one of those things where it's literally a locked-in choice, it's either or, but they give you the pretense that you actually made a choice. I hope they move away from that, and it's actually, and I don't know how they're gonna do this, because again, this sounds fantastic on paper, but there's so many complexities when it comes to a system like that. Is that system going to respond to just relationship choices that you make, or is it going to be predefined to specific missions? Like if a mission is tied to the story, then that time dilation option, you will be available to you, or to travel to another world to go finish something and then come back, and then those consequences of whatever you did, you'll have to deal with. Or is it going to be more fluid in the sense that you're going to be able to do those or make or pursue those choices and don't have to do them simply because of the fact that they're part of the main story, if that makes sense to you?
So I just responded back to Reichi where he says, "What is great about Ciphers Chain books is you can read them without being a 40k fan. That's it. It's like Andor TV series. It's good without knowing the Star Wars law, the lore. Yeah, listen, I'll put it on my list to read after I finish the Exodus books because I'm always down for anything. And as soon as you said Andor, I know you're not saying this like Andor, but the fact that I could just dive into it and love it, yeah, I'm 100% there, man. To your point, what we've got from the story, sorry, from the interviews, is that they really want to focus on this. They're saying like this is a huge part of the game that they want us to focus on. So, is it going to be like every small decision? Probably not. It's probably going to be part of the main game, right?
Yeah.
So, like a Jennifer like question, there's going to be all these kind of important questions that's going to have a pivotal moment. What they've hinted at, or at least from what I gleaned from the interviews, is that decisions that you made at the very start will actually have a role in the ending as well. So, and this is very important here because to do something like this and to make it work well from the very get-go, you need to already know exactly what's going on. You need to know that this particular story leads to 7 different branches, which then leads to multiple different branches and more branches upon more branches. So it's going to be hard to execute. And what I will say is, as long as they have an idea of where they're going, and as long as, this is their story, because listen, they were given a budget. And if you want to spend most of that budget writing, stories and watching it play out, then fair enough. That's great. So I'm going to trust their vision on it. But if I was to speculate, I would think it's more moment to moments, Mass Effect like, with the Quarries, with the Geth, all these kind of decisions. But you're getting more and more of these decisions that's playing a role. We don't want a situation where, I don't really mind if it's even something similar to The Witcher, where it's like, okay, the big decisions are there and the smaller ones are not as important. And you don't need to create potentially 50 different endings for me. As long as you've created I'm good.
I agree with you. So for me, it's make the illusion look real. Make me, but like this is I think is an art that has slowly, like, BioWare lost it, of course, over the years. But I feel that even games like exceptionally very, very good role-playing action games like Cyberpunk and The Witcher, as good as those games are, it's still, the choice still has a lot of levels of illusion, in the sense that you're not really making a different choice. It just appears, and they hide that behind, like, the dialogue options and maybe 1 or 2 things, looking like they are working out differently, but then only to find that at the end it's exactly the same thing. But I really, really think that in today's games we need to work on that. And if they pull this off, then they've won me as a fan. If they can pull off a situation where we can go back to choices feeling more real, like I made something different, like with smaller scale, like for instance, a good company, well, a good example of this where this was done, and I suppose this is to their credit, is that Baldur's Gate did this successfully, where every choice actually mattered and made a difference in the world. If they can do this with this time dilation mechanic, dude, they've got me. Like, this is gonna be my next sort of, because it means that every single time I play this game, even if it's, and I'm a huge fan of this thing, Taiwe, even if it's like, let's say, it's 90% the same, but 10% of something I chose makes a difference. Like, that's like how Mass Effect 1 works, is that you can play that game and 99.9% will be exactly, let's say, the same experience, but that 0.5 that you maybe did not do the first time you played the game, and then you do it maybe on your second playthrough, and it changes something. And then you have a surprise dialogue option that you didn't know that you had, or it opens up a part of the game that you didn't know you could access. To me, that always blows my mind.
Yeah. Reichi says the most economical, viable way to make this mechanic work is the Mass Effect 3, where you get reports of what happened after your decisions. I strongly agree there.
Yeah.
I will say the added part is because you can go back to these planets, so they've confirmed you can go back to these planets and see what's up. They will need to animate and show me that people have changed. So
Yes.
if I made a decision and now the humans have become celestials, they need to be celestials, right? If I made a decision where I've sided with this person who has a different vision, that vision needs to be displayed on the planet in some way, shape, or form. And I would even say go further and maybe create even maybe smaller side missions that are exclusive to that particular branch. This all takes time and money and effort, and I'm not expecting something crazy enough. I just want this game to succeed and do well. And if that happens, then we can expect way more from it, right? So,
But think about it. Think about
Dalgrim,
like when
just real quick, Dalgrim says new Exodus news. There's no new Exodus news. We're
no.
just talking about it, pretty much, Dal. And we're talking about the lore elements. So the first act, they prequel their prologue, the history. James Olsen and Drew working on the title. I'll be dropping more videos on this, but I just wanted to do like a sit down podcast with you guys and to see to kind of gauge the excitement levels. Rachel also says, "I love how Mass Effect 3 you receive reports out of nowhere of something you did in Mass Effect 1." Okay,
Yes.
yeah, that's another good point.
So the whole thing, like for them, like the challenge for them, and again, if you look at Mass Effect 1 and 2, I think are the perfect examples of choices and decisions carrying over from one game to another. And it was done there so seamlessly, much more than I would say Mass Effect 1 to 3. 3, that's when like, some of the gaps start to show. So where because of the fact that like the game was rushed and they didn't give it enough time, you can start to see some of the holes in the in how the how like what's the word is it how the cheese is made, like you can start to see like some of the things behind the scenes, and it doesn't work as smoothly, whereas from Mass Effect 1 to 2 it was almost, I had never experienced anything like that before, like a character recognizing you for interacting with them in that specific part of the universe because of something you did in the first game. And my thing is they have to swing for the game has to be, they have to build it in such a way that it's literally all three Mass Effect games in one. That each chapter almost serves that role. So chapter 1 you make decisions, chapter 2 there's consequences for some of those decisions, and then later on in the game you also then go back and revisit some of those decisions you made in the first game. But every single thing you do maybe through these 3 chapters, could be 10 chapters, doesn't matter, but you divide them as up in such a way that each and every one of them sort of doesn't just move the story, but it changes like how your companions feel about you, how the galaxies or the planets around you feel, like how no like how hardcore RPGs work, where every decision affects everyone's sort of like perception of you. If they can pull that off, they've got me. And you can, and like my thing is this tight. Think about this: if you have a budget, and then you take your gaming budget and you focus it on making an expansive, open world game, all those resources, if you had to scale them down and then just focus them on making sure that each place, as I said in the beginning, each part of the game is actually, it's human made. It's not done by AI or whatever. Everything is almost custom made. If you can do that, which is what they did with the first Mass Effect, it was so successful in storytelling and so effective because of the fact that each part of that there was focus. You could tell that these characters or these conversations were crafted by people. If they can keep to that, where it's not an open world free for all where you can go to all the planets, but the story is focused on, okay, you've completed this part of the game, now move on to this. If you remember Mass Effect 1, there's literally about 5 chapters, and you sort of know which chapter you're on. The first one is the opening, and then after that it's the Citadel. After the Citadel, it's finding Liara. After finding Liara, it's chasing Saren, and then the final act. If they can build that game in that way, and then you know where you are, and each time you revisit, like for instance, that would be like going back to the Citadel after Vermeer and finding out something that you did on Vermeer affected the Citadel.
Yeah, no, I get you. Just a quick one. Diagram says, "You become the butcher of Blaviken. You never be welcome in that place again, and that reputation will follow you throughout the experience." Yes, Witcher. That is That is it right there, and I'm hoping that's what they can execute. As both of you have but illustrated, if you can make a decision, and that decision is well thought out, well executed, we're onto something special here. Listen, I don't think the gameplay or the games looks crazy expensive from a budgetary point of view. So I'm hoping that like there's a lot of story that's going to carry it. And I was speaking to a friend about this, and he saw the trailer too as well, and he was like, "Yeah, it doesn't look anything too crazy wise. It looks okay." And but we both said the exact same thing. It's the story that's going to carry this game. And one of the points that they keep mentioning so much is the actual story. Like, no, this is a story. It's almost like they had this concept and they said we need to build the game around this concept. Not like, hey, we have this gameplay, and the gameplay is cool. Because if you look at Skyrim is a perfect example of a game that was built around the concept of exploration, right? And it was executed perfectly well. So it served the story. The story came second to the actual exploration. Fighting games are built around the actual combats and the combos, and then you build whatever story around it. And this game, from what they're saying, it seems like that. Almost like James and Drew were like, okay, what are we gonna do? Okay, this is a story. Now let's work on the gameplay. Let's work on all this other random stuff that people might want. But we know that as Mass Effect fans or RPG fans, this is what they're looking for.
Yeah.
Richie says, "I trust Batarians more than DSR." What the?
I was also wondering what is that about?
Like, why would you even? Why is that a thing?
I don't know. I have no idea. Like what Richie woke up and just chose violence against the Asari for no reason.
The Grim says that is a mark of consistency of consequence. Yes, when you can see the results. We're not asking for anything too crazy per se. Especially if you're gonna make a sequel, I think that this is where they could get hurt. If you go read the expansive options the first game, and you're gonna make a sequel, now you gotta consider those points. So I think this is where it hurts, unless you're willing to do something different, like, oh well, in a different part of the universe or galaxy, this is what happened.
So I don't believe that's necessary though. Like, and again, we've had this discussion before, and it's the whole thing of like how difficult it was for the Veilguard guys to sort of carry over decisions from 3 games. And the thing is, Dragon Age has always done it the more effective way, in the sense that Shepard is more hard to do in terms of his story than I would say doing like the trilogy or the phology or whatever. Was it the quantum? I don't know what you call it, like 4 games. But I think if you look at like how Mass Effect is built, is that individual choices tend to sort of like lock you into lore much more than galaxy-wide choices. Because you can still navigate and manipulate galaxy-wide choices much more because they don't involve individual characters. And I think they got that right with the first 3 Dragon Age games, is because they made it that everything that affects the world are decisions that your character made. Those decisions, your character is not going to be available in the next game, but those decisions have affected the world. And I think you can build lore easier that way. I don't see the limitations. If you say, okay, cool, this is where we want the world to end up. And the 3 decisions or the 5 decisions we're going to give you will take us there anyway. But you're not going to realize that up until you get to the 3rd game. That, oh, okay, cool. So it did change the outcome for me, but, my personal character, but the universe still stays the same.
Okay, so but that's it as a decision, right? That's like a Jennifer's question, and you wipe out, the Krogans in the first game, so you wiped out a group of Celestials in the first game, and if those Celestials become important in the second game, how do you write them off for those people who've killed them? Like, that just seems like extra work, no?
So, like, what I would do is I would try and stay close to what they did in the first 2 games as possible. Like, where if you're going, like, and they did this so expertly between Mass Effect 1 and 2, is that then you introduce new concepts that take you outside those those smaller worlds changing, defining or defining decisions, if I'm making sense. So in other words, the next story that you're building, you're not going to build around the Citadel. You're gonna build it around Omega, around these other worlds, around these other places, but you're taking the team with you. That's like, for instance, now again, if you're playing a central character, if your central character is dead and they made decisions that change that part of the world, all you need to do is then make sure then that for your next part of your game, you're just going to focus the story in a place. And I know this sounds like Railgun, but you're going to focus the story into a place where those consequences are not going to change what the original the original choices were, or like the original decisions that you made are. They're not going to affect the story in that. And they've done this. I mean, like, if you look at like between Mass Effect 1 and 3, they managed to walk that line. I mean, what broke, the only thing that broke was the last 25 minutes of the game, where like the ending. But everything else except, okay, yeah, there's two things. It's the Rachni Queen, and it was the three decisions at the end. What did they get wrong in Mass Effect? What did not translate, or what didn't, like going back to your genophage question? That worked out. Like, I mean, like, they managed to export the genophage from Mass Effect 2 to 3, and you still had to make decisions there that determined the outcome.
Let me put this in the chat real quick before I answer that. Do you guys think, Dal and Reichi, that it's safer if Archetype Studios, they make a game where you do have consequential decisions, but nothing too shattering that could change certain groups too much? So, for example, think about Mass Effect, right? If you get rid of the if you save if you wipe out the Krogans in the first game, for example, right, there wouldn't be a second game. The Krogans are quite important in the Mass Effect universe. How do you write that off for those people who essentially got rid of them? I think you kind of write yourself into a corner, because now you're spending more resources trying to write them out of the game, but also trying to replace them with something new. And now you got to do new animations, new this, new that, especially if the story is going to be really interesting. If you see a situation where you've gone rid of wipe of the Krogans, but now you don't have a Krogan teammate who's Rex, who you enjoy, you like laughing with, and all that voice acting, and the stories that comes with that character. I just think it's too much to ask to really make these kind of decisions. If it's a once-off game, I think it works. If it's a game that could be a trilogy, or 6 games in one, I don't know how you do it.
I think you can.
Wiping our races.
Like, I really think that's the way that we need to go forward. And then this is where I suppose AI will come in the future.
Well, actually, okay, let me just read the Grimm's comments, where he says, what would really be crazy good? Individual choices can change minds of individuals in spite of your overarching consequences stemming from world-altering choices.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's good as well, actually. So, like, maybe an example would be, well, I mean, would an example be something like as simple as maybe even like the Quarrens and the Geth going to war? I mean, for me personally, I know for a fact that the reason why the Quarrens are alive is because I like Tali. That was my individual choice. So I was like, oh, sorry. I mean, Legion, the Geth, I actually side with you guys. I think you guys are amazing. But Tali's saying no, so I guess that's you guys get wiped out. But no, I get what you mean. Ashos, what are you saying?
Sorry, I was gonna talk about like this whole, or just try to dive deeper in terms of like this whole thing of like, so what is the fear here? Let me just understand, because again, this is the same mistake that like the guys in Veilguard made, and I actually I started writing a script where I spoke about like how they could have actually strung all that together, but I can't remember what were some of my points there. So that's why I want you to just sort of like say, what are some of your concerns here between like, let's say one standalone experience versus having this experience span over multiple games and choices carrying over?
The problem becomes, it has nothing to do with the gameplay per se, but it has more to do with writing yourself into a corner and creating a situation. Like, for example, there's people in the Witcher team that looked at the creative writers for The Witcher and said, "Why did you write these three endings where Geralt potentially dies? Like, I mean, like, what am I supposed to do with this? Like, I can't.
Yeah.
Like, I want to write a good story, but I can't because you shoehorned me." And even when Casey and Drew left, there's probably the writer for Andromeda was like, "I didn't want to write Andromeda. I wanted to kind of follow up on the Mass Effect universe in the Milky Way, but because you guys screwed everything up, now I have to do this random thing that is so different."
Yeah.
So the problem becomes when you start wiping out, making crazy decisions like this, you kind of limit what you can do with that group of people unless you find some kind of replacement for them. Now, I think an argument that you would make is AI would do a really great job in kind of fixing that, and I think so too as well.
In terms of resources and time, because if the concern is resources and time, then I think AI will supplement some of that in terms of saying, well, because your fear, in my understanding, is that your main concern is that what's going to happen is that they're going to have to do double work. Like, for instance, if the outcome for a planet was one, everyone is dead, the other was everybody survives, they're going to have to write both those stories for both of those outcomes, right? For the sequel.
Yes.
So that if I chose like to destroy, in my game that's reflective in the story. And if someone else chose to keep or to nurture whatever, then that those people will be present there in the next game. So you're saying it will take too long for them to be able to create or like separate those or to split those decisions for
Yes.
the next game.
Yes.
And you know what my not my rebuttal to that, but you know what makes me optimistic that that's not going to be a problem, because you can do that. Traditional RPGs work like that, like whether it's pen and paper RPGs or it's old school CRPGs, they go into that level of detail because of the fact that they don't have to worry about fancy graphics on the the latest physics and all that. It's literally everything is if you remember those books back in the day, like your choose your own adventure books, everything is written in a way that there's 50 different endings, and all of them are unique to the individual that is playing the game. And I think that's the future, and I think that's how we need to make games going forward. Every game needs to be different based on the person that's experiencing the game. And I think Mass Effect was taking us there, and then we've backtracked, or BioWare was taking us towards that direction, but we've backtracked quite significantly. And the reason why is because our focus is not in the right place. Stop building these open, big worlds that require all these resources. This is why this game, I'm glad, looks so cheap, because it tells me that then maybe they focus on the stuff that's important, which is the writing, the story development, and that branching. If you remember with Mass Effect, they had that whole thing mapped out in terms of like where all these branching decisions are going from the first game. So they already had ideas. Sorry, go ahead.
No. I agree, and I think like you said there, we're putting resources into places that we probably shouldn't be to make a specific kind of game. The only thing still is, even at that, like a Mass Effect game, like Mass Effect 1, 2, and 3, you kind of see how their decisions all affected each other. Whatever they played a role to each other, but it's okay to get rid of a Caden or simple characters like this and just replace them, but it's when you've literally made a shattering decision, like wiping out because I told you I'll speak to Mass Effect fans and I'll say straight up, they say, oh well, I don't want the game because it's not going to take into my decision into focus, and I'm like, so are you happy with the Quarrens being wiped out? Like, how do you make a Mass Effect 4 without the Quarrens?
Well, for my game, if I wiped them out for my game, yes, I'm happy. Then Tai, again, this is a simple bait and switch trick. Which they did this, like, and I don't understand why, like, they stopped doing this. They didn't do this with Veilguard. Then just switch out the Quarians for a species for those people that, in fact, you can use exactly the same assets if you really want to.
But you see, here's the problem then, because one thing that Mass Effect did really well is that it tied each species to the story. So the Quarians were defined by their mistakes, and that's why they wear the suits, and that's the situation with the Geth, right?
Yeah.
So, and same thing with the Krogans, they're super powerful alien races, and they could live long, blah, blah, blah. That's why the genophage happened, blah, 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 blah. All these characters are defined by the actual stories. So if you wiped out the Quarians, and you've now replaced them with a new race, with a new concept story, that story actually could be extremely interesting. But
Yeah.
you're telling somebody who made that decision 5 games ago, 20 years ago, that,
It's
oh,
fine.
sorry, this decision is so cool, but
Yeah.
you can't get it because you did this decision 20 years ago. And now you have writers who are actually, writing this story because it's a really cool concept, and it's completely wasted. And I think that's the
But
problem.
that's the
If we're
thing.
talking smaller missions,
That's
okay.
the thing.
But
You're absolutely
fundamental missions,
yeah.
oof.
And you know what? I'm gonna challenge you on that because the conversation you're having is the conversation I heard the guy from the I think it's the creative director from Bethesda. That's exactly he said exactly what you said. He said the difference between Baldur's Gate and say a game like Starfield is that in Starfield we believe about I think he gave a number like 50+% of the people playing the game will be able to see 90% of everything or majority, like if you finish the game 100%, you will be able to see everything that the game has to offer. You probably gonna miss around at the most 30%. He says the difference between that and what you get in Baldur's Gate is that Baldur's Gate, even if you complete the game, chances are you will never be able to. You'll probably touch about 20% about what the game has to offer in terms of like decisions. You'll probably be only like in terms of the ones that affect you directly and the ones that you made and that moved the world. You can have 20 playthroughs, Taya. You'll probably get to about 50% of experiencing everything that can happen in the game. And he says, but we don't make games like that. We make games in such a way that we narrow down the choices so that we have a more homogeneous experience that everybody can experience. Making sense?
So I was on mute. Yes, I completely agree. However, when Baldur's Gate 4 comes out, and if we're using the same universe and the same story, hold on, that's what this guy is saying. And my Mass Effect 4 would be Citadel Alliance barely won. Most of the core wins are wiped out. The Geth got destroyed because of the Crucible. Now the galaxy is in chaos and have to create another. I'm 90% with you there. The only people I wouldn't want destroyed is the Geth. I think the Geth are actually interesting enough. But I mean, I could actually see I could actually see them being wiped out. Actually, yeah. So that's not a bad take at all. I would say I'm 95% with you there. Then I think the idea of the Citadel Alliance barely won and the Corwins being whoa, the Corwins being wiped out. No, no, we're not on the same page, bro. Raichi, nah, not at all. The Corwins need to be in the game. Everyone needs to be in the game who was in that previous game, 100%. The only ones who I can understand not being there is the Geth. I even want the Leviathans to be in the game. I think that would be a good storyline.
And then my thing again just comes down to like all you do is, and this is not difficult. I mean, again, like if you look at
wait, but hold on, wait, Baldur's Gate 4. How do you write that then?
You don't. Ask what's his name? Svenk. Ask him how is he writing that. He's not. He's writing another game.
But you see, that's the thing. So if like.
So
even Divin's Original Sin 2, like, there's decisions that you make that are good, and I think you can make the decision that gives you the illusion that you've done something crazy, but it's just when the reason why again we went to Andromeda is simply because it was too hard to write for the Mass Effect galaxy. Right now we know the lead writer is Mary DeMarle for Mass Effect. And she's she's probably working hard, trying to write everything properly. But there's no doubt that she's thinking to herself, oh, man, like you guys made this a lot harder than it needs to be.
I agree.
She's saying to herself, like, okay, what do we do with the Geth? Do we get rid of them? Because apparently if you chose red, they're gone. Do we get rid of something like Edie? Do we get rid of the Corwins? Do we get rid of the Krogans? Like, these are not questions that she wants to answer. She just wants a blank slate where we can just canonize this and say, okay, fine, this is correct, this is correct, this is correct, and let's push on from that.
So my question is, like, again, like the whole Mass Effect thing, I just think, like, to me is an impossible situation that was purposely created by BioWare to be impossible. Because at no point, like, you could have ended that game without having to wipe out very specific races. All you should have had in that situation is that you've got all your. If the whole thing was based around just the war assets, there would not be a single problem, because all it would mean is that, okay, cool, how much of the geth did you lose? You lost 90% of the geth. You lost 50% of the sorry. You lost almost 100%, or like you maybe 90% of the humans. You know, if you had built it around almost, it's like a stat based, like, okay, cool, the war is over, we've beaten the Reapers, or we were defeated by the Reapers. Let's look at the scorecard. Okay, so your scorecard is very similar to like how Mass Effect 2 ended, where all your team members could die and you're the only one that survives. But the game still goes on. In the next game, you still have substitute for every single character that dies. You can always do it right. But if you make such huge choices of wiping out entire parts of the galaxy, taking out mass relays, that is your bad choices as a writing team to do that. You could have written a Mass Effect 3 ending that could have included everybody's possible without having to wipe out entire species. Because the game is not built around the Geth are attacking the galaxy in such a way that they're not wiping out people. You are through a trivial 3 choices.
Mm-hmm.
So that's just bad writing, dude. The reason it doesn't work and it always puts people in a corner is because that game, the ending was poorly written. The original ending would have worked, that Drew wrote, Drew Karpyshyn wrote. The ones that they revised did not work because it was rushed and it was not very well thought out.
Listen, I would agree with you right there. That's actually my point. You know, as long as the writing is not like too dramatic, then you might not have to deal with these things. However, if you were to ask Mass Effect fans back then, they would say like, no, like the fact that you're letting me destroy a whole group of people is the reason why I love this game, because that's such an important decision. The fact that you're letting me decide if the Krogan should live or not, this is what, like, these are the questions, because till this day you find people still debating, was the genophage right or wrong, not the initial implementation, but the fact that you chose to not cure that genophage while siding with the because think about it, how can the gravity of that decision have a way on you if there's no if you're not risking anything when you're deciding to save the organics or versus the synthetics? The only way that decision has that impact is if you actually make that decision. Now, if you're just a situation where you don't have to make that decision, well, that story point doesn't get memorable. You don't talk about it 5 years later, 10 years later. So I see what they were trying to do, and I love it. But it does obviously come with consequences on how do we proceed afterwards. And the people who wrote that version for Mass Effect 3, they clearly didn't care. They just wanted the fans to feel good about these decisions and have these impactful decisions. Until this day, what they know is that 10 years later, 15 years later, people will still be talking about that decision that I made them make. I think as a writer, that's what you want. It's just the people who are following up from that are not in that same position. They have something very difficult to deal with.
Ty, you're the only person that thinks those endings were like there was an end, like those endings created like Gamergate. They started Gamergate. That's how like legendary bad those endings. Everyone hate. The only people that didn't hate those endings, and it was for different reasons, and it sort of started this whole thing of journalists saying that gamers were entitled. The only people that liked those decisions were the journos. And again, I'll just ask you this question in regard to those those 3 decisions. Let's say you played Mass Effect 3 up until, because that happens literally in the last hour, let's say, of the game, right? You've been playing it for about 120 hours. You've done all the side missions. It's probably about 80 hours, I think, if I remember correctly. If you do everything, you do collect all the war assets. So, what within the game before that last act? All those choices that you made there, Tae, did all those choices not pan out successfully? And these are now everything up until the last hour of the game, right? Was everything not well thought out enough for it to work out? Is there anything that fell apart?
No, I thought it was fine.
So they were able to string decisions you made in Mass Effect 1 all the way up into Mass Effect 3 successfully.
Yeah, but there was no core like life changing decision, right? Like we're just kind of getting rid of certain people.
No, but there was, like, for instance, whether or not, like, what you did with the Reaper base at the end, all those decisions were decisions, like, every decision you made in
Reaper
Mass
based,
Effect.
or even like, or even with the council, right? So
Well,
the council,
yes.
they're gone. So I think, yeah, listen, I think you can do it like that. You know, you can have these decisions that can be kind of giving you the idea that it's small or big. So I'm not really disagreeing per
Okay.
se with you.
So,
But of course, it's when, but you see, those decisions can be kind of accounted for, right? Especially how important they
yes,
are.
that's
The
exactly my
biggest
point.
decision was a Citadel decision. However, when you get to Mass Effect 3 and that game finishes, now we have the decisions that are diverging so differently.
But my
Like,
thing is this, like, those decisions take place when in the last hour of the game, when
mhm,
you've already got conclusions to every storyline they started in Mass Effect 1. They've
mhm.
successfully tied up in a trilogy. I'll give you an example. You said that those decisions were insignificant, but when was the decision for the genophage, whether or not to cure the genophage, made? Isn't that a story that takes place over 3 games?
Mhm.
And where does the conclusion doesn't happen in the last act? It
Mhm.
happens in the second, I think, act of the game.
Mhm.
And you solve and you resolve that without breaking law whatsoever, regardless of the decision. Because so many things have to come together for many different people. Like, the variables in that mission express what can be done. To me, it shows you the possibility of what you can do with a choice mechanic if it's done properly.
No, but see, the problem is, sorry, I'm talking about the conclusion of that, right? So they did a great job in telling you about the Quarren question, the Jennifer's question, and
Yes.
then we saw the conclusion of those answers, which was great, right? But the reason why
Yes.
we saw those conclusions was because it was a trilogy. It was the end of the trilogy, so we had to get an
100%.
answer. Now, the reason why what Archetype is doing is slightly different is if they give you that conclusion, because remember this is time dilation, right? So we can just skip straight to that conclusion right now. You make that Jennifer's decision on a Monday, you pick up your game on Tuesday, you play it, there you go, you have the results right there.
Yeah.
So my worry is they're showing you these conclusions, which is perfectly fine, but when Exodus 2 comes out,
Yeah.
is that celestial race that is now evil or is now good? How do you write them into Exodus number 2, Exodus number 3, Exodus number 4? It becomes increasingly difficult
It does.
to factor that in. So I just want them to not overreach and be in a position that Mass Effect Andromeda had to be in. Because I mean, till
Yeah.
this day, right now, we all know with Mass Effect 4, whenever that comes out, the writing has to be, they either have to canonize things, or the writing has to be perfect on that for fans to be happy.
Okay.
But I don't think that's even possible. I don't think
So,
fans
but
will be happy.
my thing is, it's been done, and the only reason why we've not refined this formula is because it's only Mass Effect that's ever tried to do it successfully. I'm saying that the original trilogy, if you take out the last hour, where they were literally just pinning, in my opinion, that last hour, if it didn't happen, and they used the mechanics that they built within the game, which was the war asset mechanics, they could have had the perfect ending that would have given the perfect start for Mass Effect 4. Because all you have to do is make sure that in the conflict with the Reapers, things are changed enough. Maybe there'd be one ending where it's not the canon ending. Like maybe an ending where you destroy the whole galaxy and nobody survives. Maybe that ending, of course, you can't really canonize. Not all endings. If you have 50 endings, there's no ways that you're gonna canonize all 50 endings. But I'm saying you can bring down the number of people that are going to choose the worst ending. Because the worst ending is normally, or the worst and the best ending are normally not the canon endings. It's always the endings in the middle. And I'm saying to you, if you look at Mass Effect 1 to 3, because that's what we're talking about. We're saying that this game is now in number 1, and we're maybe going to make it a trilogy. Look at how simple that game was, but how it was able to tie together every single story thread, regardless of the choices you made. Just the genophage alone, that mission, like there were 20 different choices, or 30, or even 50 that were made in the previous games, but everyone's choice got rewarded within law.
Okay, I think we're saying Similar-ish things, because I'm focusing on just the actual outcome, right? Because you're right, everyone's got their answers to the questions, and if we remove the last 1 hour of Mass Effect, everyone's happy. Everyone's like, okay, you know,
100%.
these
Yes.
are my conclusions. But even if but let's say you remove the last hour of Mass Effect 3,
Yeah.
what happens in Mass Effect 4?
It's simple. Like again, this is the weird thing about BioWare because I don't know how many years I had to think about this and procrastinate. I don't know, like just like try and dig deep into try and find out why they made this decision. If you look at like Mass Effect 3 up until like that last hour, they built the mechanics to finish the game without the need for that mission on Earth. In fact, the mission on Earth could have ended with you just blowing up that Reaper and not going in. That whole thing with the elusive man did not need to happen. And the Star Child. In fact, the Star Child could have been removed completely from the game, and you could have still had a concise game that told a story between three games. Because it added nothing that impacted the story whatsoever. You could have defeated the Reapers using the Crucible. The Crucible could have been a rocket launcher that you put on your back and you shoot the last Reaper and you blow it up. It does not change the world drastically. The world, yes, things have shifted. You've lost huge property, and the easiest way to do it, Taye, is you tie it all the stakes. You create. You don't tie the story. Don't have these. Take out those scenes with the kid. Use that time and those resources to focus on building a connection with all these war assets that you're losing. Every war asset is critical. Every race is crucial. Everyone cares about their people, and the central conflict with your team could be, you know what, I want 100% of the Asari to survive, but if I want to save maybe another 30% of the Quarians, I'm going to have to risk maybe like that number coming down to 50%. Use the war asset mechanic, and at the end of the day, regardless of what the ending is, where the emotional impact comes in is maybe Liara is angry at you because of the fact that, listen, you cost 2/3 of my people. Yes, there's some Asari planets left, but because of your choices, we only have one planet or two planets left with Asari. You wiped out almost 100% of the Krogan, or the Krogan homeworlds. You let them die so that you could prioritize this planet. So you could still have all these choices mattering for that specific game, but none of them have to put you in a position where you now having to decide whether the Quarians or the Geth are going to be in the next game.
Yeah, to anyone watching this, just to give you guys a recap, me and Arjus were talking about the idea of the use of time dilation, which could see huge changes that you as a player are going to make when it comes to the decisions in the game. That could be smaller scale, like how a family member is treated, 20 years later. Do they hate you? Do they love you? Do they like you? But then there's also decisions that you can possibly make that might change the whole planet. So maybe you left a piece of tech that has now turned a group of people into celestials. Maybe you've wiped out a whole group of people. And then the question that becomes, from a writing perspective, how do you carry that going forward? Are we in a situation where you might write yourself into a corner? Or are we in a situation where, maybe we don't want to make too many drastic changes. So when Exodus number 2 comes out, we don't have to incorporate all of Ty's decisions that are so dramatically different and Osh's decisions that are so dramatically different into this game, because that just kind of wastes time. And Oshus was just giving his point of view, saying that you don't need to kind of make these drastic decisions, but you can make decisions where certain groups are affected, maybe not 100%, but 80%. So I think he brought up how the Quarians don't need to be wiped out, but maybe 90% of them is wiped out. So you don't need to write off certain characters and certain things, which I would actually agree with. I think that's actually probably the best way to actually do this. And you can have some decisions where you maybe wipe out a whole group of people, but these people are not so important in the next game that it doesn't matter. So let's think about the Vulture, for example, right? As a villain, as a group of bad guys that's what they were created for. Maybe you wipe them out in Mass Effect 1. And because they're only going to be used as, cannon fodder in Mass Effect 2 and 3, you could just kind of write them off and just
Yeah.
kind of replace them with some other kind of bad standard guy or whatever. So I would say Ushers has convinced me enough based on everything he said. He's
And
presented a good argument.
and you know why I'm such a stickler for this thing, Ty, is because if we don't start doing this now, we're never gonna get into the habit as an industry or as gaming where stories, because the way we're headed is not better graphics, it's not better whatchamacallit, better controllers and whatever. We're headed to a point like where everyone's story is going, like by the time we have neural link working the way it's supposed to, or like a proven technology, everyone, you're going to buy Call of Duty and your Call of Duty experience is going to be unique to you. So no two people are going to play the same game. The only thing that's going to be the same is if we do a multiplayer game and we are sharing a world. But anything within that world, everyone will sort of like play or have a different experience. And I think if we don't start pushing towards that now and have games that are successful doing that, look at the Mass Effect and or BioWare falling out of the picture, how far back that took us. I mean, like people were complaining. I mean, one of the key complaints when CD Projekt launched Cyberpunk was the fact that the game offered you the illusion of choice, but none of the choices really mattered. So you can still have strong writing, but if the choices are not the same as what you get in a CRPG, then we're not evolving the medium. Like I'm for games that I don't want us to all have the same experience. I want you to play Last of Us and say, "Wow, that game was awesome. I made friends with everyone. I got a happy ending." And then when you ask me about my game and I say to you, "Nah, dude, like that's the most depressing game I've ever played. Hated everything, killed everyone." That is like I think where we need to go with role playing games.
I think that's a good argument. And I think we'll probably start seeing it now. Would you say CD Projekt Red was a little bit guilty of this?
In what way?
Cyberpunk.
Yes, I think they were guilty of this because again, like I think The Witcher 3 they did such a good job of giving us like this world where doesn't matter what the order you play the stories, you end up progressing the overall progression, and they did a very good job with that. And I feel that with Cyberpunk, especially with the dialogue options, a lot of them did not really allow. Like I've played the game now 3 times and none of them actually sort of work out. Like they don't give you varying paths. There's very few choices in Cyberpunk that actually change the direction of the game, but you still don't feel it because the game is that damn good.
Yeah. No, I get you. I think you've made a good argument for that, and let's hope the guys at Access probably they know this as well, right? I would imagine.
Yes.
I imagine they've probably seen what happened with Mass Effect and thought to themselves like, yeah, we can't be fucking wiping out too much, and if we do, we need to plan ahead.
Dude, like the cool thing about this, now, and this is what I love about it, is that the people working on this have been doing this since 1995, because the guy, what's his name, James
Olsen, yeah.
James Olsen, like, how do you design Baldur's Gate 1? You literally, it's these, like, every choice, they have, like, those little, what do you call them? Those scissors where everything is sort of, like, splitting into, okay, so you make this decision, then it splits into this. That is how they used to design those games when they were sitting down. So there's no one better in the universe to do this than those two guys. I mean, Drew has been doing it with, much later on, with the Mass Effect series. But all the older BioWare games were based on this because traditional CRPGs always have like 50 to 100 different endings. So you always and a lot of those endings, not always the case. I mean, that's something that they kind of reintroduced with Mass Effect, but a lot of those have to carry over to the next, or will affect how the world state is in the next game. So you have to account for those. It's not easy, but these guys are the best guys to do it.
Yeah. No disagreements there whatsoever. I think you're spot on with that. I think even CD Projekt Red have learned a little bit as well, because I understand it's almost like the Star Wars situation, right? When you get a director to direct, what's the guy's name again? James Abraham.
J.J. Abrams, and then the other one was the one that they hate, Ryan Johnson.
Yeah, so it's like, if you're just gonna let James do what he wants to do, and then then you give it to Ryan, he's gonna do what he wants to do. The story's gonna get messed up, and people are gonna feel trapped. And James was obviously trapped a little bit with the last movie. So as long as you have a template as okay, this is what's going to happen with the series. These are where we can go a bit crazy, but we can't go too crazy here because this is not going to work out well for us.
Yeah.
As long as you're planning, I think you're in a good position. In this scene, right, I don't know if you saw this part right here, the video that's up right now. It's basically this is like one of the techno guys who's just kind of like, what, I'm doing this for myself, I don't care about the peasants. I thought this part here was really funny because it's like, oh, like send me, links of some girls who want to come through.
I saw that.
And then he shows, and then he's like, okay, well, we'll see what she's willing to do, to get a space. And when I saw this part, I was thinking like, I always say is like, usually why I like these kind of trailers and all these kind of snippets is because it can also kind of hint as to the kind of game they're trying to make.
Yes.
And the kind of vibe that they're going for. So when I saw this trailer, I was all like, okay, is romance going to be a big thing? Are they going to deal with like potentially dark themes of like what people have to do to survive? Then never seen the clips of how like, oh, that lady who was on the ship, hey, the ship is running out of resources, so let's take our pancreas and give it to this sort of scientist who's more important. Like these kind of things, even though they're not actually gameplay, but it kind of gives you a hint as to the kind of story that they're trying to write or the world that they're trying to create. So I thought this was pretty interesting and cool. It'd be like, okay, she ain't too bad. It's like, okay, well, let's see what she's willing to do for the space on the ship. I was like, you motherfucker, like what a terrible person. But on second thoughts, better have two fluids after all. So I thought the captain and another passenger is to be added to the manifest. Not yet. First, let's see what she's willing to do to get on the safe place on the ark.
Jesus,
and someone to clean
that
up
is
afterwards.
cold, dude. Like I love that. That to me is that's proper science fiction writing. Like it's not this thing of trying to play to try and softball the players into only making righteous and moral choices. This is what a role-playing game is supposed to be, because this is your choice as the player. If you're I don't know what the honor system is going to be like, but like if you're like a good sort of like what's the word? Is a righteous what is it? Is it the alignment? If you're a righteous good, you're gonna do the right thing, and you're not gonna do this. Or maybe you're gonna get someone on the fairway. But if you're not, if you are like what is it, archaic or evil, whatever. Sorry, just dropped my mic. Then you're gonna make a choice that's gonna hurt someone. I love that. I think to me that gives me such, and even like that little thing where like they actually have the girls' faces and stuff. It just shows me how they're not willing to sort of like hold things back because they're worrying about like focus groups. Like, ooh, what are these people gonna think if our game has suggestive sexual elements where we're exploiting people?
But even going further back, like even this detail right here, right? So it's almost like it's like species preference, human female, human non-binary, non-human
awesome.
AI, non-human awakened species.
I like that.
You want to smash a pig, bro? Like what we talk standby.
That is exactly what he's saying. Yeah.
He's just kind of like financial status low, high. Like he doesn't want a high person because like, yeah, I mean, you ain't gonna do shit. But a low person, yeah, that's like this detail right here. Like this is what I mean. Like the analyze, like it tells you. Okay, now the fans like, okay, we look at this, and now we can kind of pull from it and say, what kind of game are they trying to make? Now it might be a charade. It might be a guy who's just like he's like this, but the director's like, what the hell is this shit? However, there's a chance that it really could be like this. There was this Reddit post that kind of blew up in the BioWare subreddit page, and there was a guy who said something like, I don't think BioWare understands that, like, because we're talking about Dragon Age.
Yeah.
He's like, I don't think BioWare understands that, like, they've made a game full of killers. Mm-hmm. Like, everyone in Mass Effect is a killer. These are, like, they kill and shoot people, and they're murderers.
Yes.
But for some reason, why are you you're forcing them to be nice? Like, why? These aren't like in real life, like these are murderers. Like, why would they be like this? And even in Dragon Age, it's like, yeah, like we go around killing people, making decisions. But when we have to talk to each other, we have to be nice. Like, what are we like? This doesn't make sense. So I completely agree that like there's a kind of like a disconnect between what you're actually doing and how and
Yes.
the things you're saying. So I'm hoping this game. Now I don't know if this game is gonna actually let you
I,
be as a bad person, because one of the things that they did mention is that they were like in Dragon Age, Olin or Olsen, one of them. He said like in Dragon Age you're your own character, your own decisions. But he was like, but in Mass Effect, you're a predetermined character, and we're kind of going for that kind of person who's a particular person. So it could be like The Witcher, where it's like this person is already kind of defined. He might be a bit mean here and there, but he's not going to be this massive bad person. So we don't really know too much. But listen, some of these clips are
no,
very
no, I love
encouraging.
this. I love like what you just showed me. Now, I actually didn't pay attention to it until you sort of like zoned in on it. I'm like, oh, okay. So I just thought it was just a random communication,
Mm,
and then I was just like a little bit surprised in the future someone is busy sending selfies. But when you gave me the context, it made a lot of sense, and that's what an RPG is. An
mm,
RPG allows you to be as ruthless as you can within the limits of the world. It allows you to be as good as you can or you want to be, if that's what how you want to play the game. Your experience is completely determined by you when it comes to
mm.
like your place in the world and who you choose to align with. So I'm really excited about that. To me, that's super exciting.
Yeah.
I see Raichi says here the only direction change in Cyberpunk is do you side with Mommy Meredith or not? And he's 100% spot on. That was the only time I remember making a decision. That entire mission actually is very well done because that's the one with Brick where you also have to decide whether or not you're gonna give Brick the chip or not. So that whole part was very well done. It's almost like they spent more time writing that single mission than they did
Mhm.
a lot of the ones that came after that. That and the heist mission, I think they put a lot of work in terms of like determining sorry, putting them together. But the heist mission, there were not very a lot of missions. The only question I remember is old Rick Ross asking me the how do I choose to die.
Oh yeah. I prefer not to die.
Like like when he says what's something about like you want to go out in a blazing something of glory or do you want to live a peaceful life and die as an old man or something like
Mhm.
that.
So what's actually funny is like because this thing that like gleamed just I'll put it in my video next time I make, but like I was watching some other creators and they were saying how like somebody asked a question and on the Reddit was like, oh, you wouldn't be able to have sex with like an awakened species or whatever in the game, and everyone was like, yeah, nah, I mean, why you not gonna have sex with a pig, And I was thinking,
Yeah.
why not? I was thinking to myself, like, I mean, who's to say like these people are different because the pigs now are like they're weird now, they're sentient in a sense now, and you have crazy like I mean, we have celestials in this game, so who's to say like that's not going to be an option? Nah, I think obviously from a to not get attacked by certain groups of people who like animal welfare or whatever, you might just take that bit out. But it asks a very important question, which is as we do evolve and as other animals even evolve, like do people start to think like this? I mean, we've already modified ourselves to be very different from human beings. Like we're not, like we are celestials now. So what's to say some people don't start to think like this? There's so much
um
opportunity in this game.
like all you have to do is type rule 34 bear, rule
Yeah,
34 fox. I mean, fairies exist for a reason. Like
yeah,
this is
true.
the de-evolution. No offense to fairies, but this is the this is the de. Actually, I suppose this is the evolution of fairies. This is where we're gonna get to. Because in cyberpunk, the cyberpunk world is very similar. But in cyberpunk, what happens is that people then start modifying their bodies to
Hmm.
have, like, for instance, animal ears. Like, for instance, bunny ears,
Yeah.
bunny noses, bunny feet, and stuff like that. So they start sort of like making themselves and what is it? Yeah,
I
that
know what
word.
you mean. Yeah.
Yeah. So they start turning themselves literally into young, like real life furries. But and again, if you think about the whole concept of uplifting species, it means that like because I saw in that same trailer, there's a giant bear that you're busy fighting. So I take
Hmm.
it, and it's wearing clothes. So it's
Hmm.
not a wild animal. So I take it they're just gonna be like Ted and the rest of these other freaking like things that we have in these Disney cartoons. They're gonna look like bears, but they're gonna be able to talk, and they're gonna sort of abide by human rules and laws. So yeah,
Oh,
I
like
don't
the
see.
pig. She has vocabulary, and she even has her own. like story. If I let me put this up, like and she's there talking like like
But is it
how.
like? But that looks like a normal pig.
Yeah, because so yeah, they're all normal animals. Like they didn't make them different. So
What?
what they did is like they just genetically made woke them up.
Oh, no, I thought at least
Like
they made them like
human looking.
furries, like with curves and stuff. That's just a pig, dude. Like I don't care if it talks or not. That's some sick there. They need to ban that. What? No, like this is not what I. This is definitely not what I had in mind.
Like I thought we were talking about something different.
I'm thinking they're gonna look like Asaris, or they're going to look like who
Yeah.
looks like who looks like an animal in even Solarians, dude. Like,
Mm.
actually, this is a good example. I've never gotten this, but I get it. Like the whatchamacallit, the Taurians, they look like birds,
Yeah, yeah,
but
yeah.
they look more. There's a lot of things, or like this. They've got so many elements, including their demeanor, their the way they carry themselves, that are human.
Hmm.
See, there I can get why people would want to blur that line, but this is just a pig, dude. This is illegal.
This is oh yeah, actually, yeah. The other
To
question I was gonna ask, but just to get to Rich's question real quick. He says, "I don't know. The pig looks tasty. I know
eat, to cook,
it's
yes,
not
to
tasty talking
grill.
about Richie." He also says, "I love text RPGs. In one, I was rich Greek asshole, and I took all the ass choices and became a slave, and try later to redeem my character by choosing more humble choices." Character development. Yeah, I think listen, any like text-based game, they can expand so much because they have like I mean they don't focus on freaking graphics and all these things, so like they can do a whole lot more. But to the awakened animals, like there's crows awakened, there's birds awakened, and I thought that was a really cool concept. One thing that I did think, that I thought was a bit interesting. I mean, this is obviously just going to be more budget and time. Is
Oh yeah.
like you said, if the humans are evolving into celestials, what's to say like why aren't the other awakened animals like pigs evolving? Right? Why didn't
That
they evolve like to grow legs, proper legs to move faster and hands, and then to change their features as well? Right?
exactly. So that's
That would be
exactly what I thought was happening in the game when you talked about uplifting animals. I thought they would, like, for instance, uplift this animal to be sort of like a furry, a human slash pig, like a Miss Piggy. She would look more like Miss Piggy,
Mhm.
but she would still maintain or retain some of her animalness. But a lot of like what she becomes is then human, not just an aware pig that can now make smarter decisions, but she can now also affect the world around her by getting a body with limbs and stuff like that. There.
Yeah, I get you. Do you know there's a character I thought about that because when I think about this, so like maybe even human, like maybe some people take human genes, some spider genes, and they kind of create like a whole new species, like just kind of all that. I was thinking about what's this character's name again?
I mean, what would you do with a smart pig?
Well, they were using them for security and things like that, right? So, for example, ravens were really good at at memories, of sort of remembering things, so they used them. Bears were used for
Yeah,
like basically became soldiers. They became medics because if you have a bear in the battlefield, like they're quite strong, big, tough.
yeah.
Using them for just like useful things. Because imagine having a pig as a pet who can actually talk and maybe take care of your kids and like actually feed them when it's time. You don't need a nanny anymore. Like the
I'm
pig
not.
does it for you, right?
Dude,
And then
I'm
when they get
sorry.
old, you can just cut them up and and that'll be that.
And that's my point, is that it biologically there's so many things wrong with that, because you can't use them as livestock anymore. And how do the rights work? The moment it's sentient, doesn't it mean that it has to have rights now?
This is exactly what I was looking for as well in the lore. And I was talking to some guys. I was like, yeah, I need to know, like, when did these pigs become awakened? Do we eat them? Do we talk to them still? Are they demanding rights? This is the lore part that, see, they might not have touched on this, but there's potential there, like, that you could just yeah, you could just grab and say, you know what,
Yeah.
the main game is the main game, but I want to know about the rights of the pick. You know, who's your Martin Luther King? Who's your Nelson? You know, who's the guy who fought for you? Who's the guy
Dude,
who?
that would be
Because
so weird.
the bears were used at first for just like, you know, medic and stuff, and then they became army kind of stuff. But there's
Mm-hmm.
also other creatures that were created during the Remnant era that were used for either memory, for war, and stuff like this. And then once that era was done, these creatures were now kind of like left in this middle ground where they couldn't. There wasn't really
Yeah.
much for them to do. Like there's this group of guys who were kind of genetically modified, like, you know, created by some remnant races, and they're very good at memory, right? So
Mm-hmm.
they've not been captured. People realize like, oh, if you capture them and you take some of like their bloodstream or whatever it is, and you like drink it, you could relive certain memory points that were like so valuable to you. So it's almost like
Mm-hmm.
a cyberpunk trip. So now these guys then become hunted, because
So that's
in no,
interesting.
yeah, and then you know the guy in the book I'm reading, there's a planet where like a lot of them have been like farmed, like they kind of like strung upside down, and they just kind of keep taking like this kind of this liquid from them to then sell on the black markets. And obviously they're just like, it's almost like whatever slaves really, because we just kind of get tied up and we just have them just stealing our juices, you know. And the more they steal, then we then get brain rot, and then we become like stupid or whatever. And I
Yeah.
was like, wow, that's freaking dark. You know, that's really dark right there. So there's all these things that's really interesting that they can touch on. I'm trying to
Wow.
what's that character in Deborah? Is it Deborah from Mass Effect? Sorry, from Mortal Kombat.
Devora, it's Devora. It's the chick with the insect thing on my
Yes.
bobs.
So I was actually thinking, I'll pull up a picture here, that it would be cool if like they actually made like like maybe if there was like a spider person, you know,
Yeah.
genetically modified, and then you have characters like Devora who are genetically spiders and also human beings, whatever. So when I was thinking about the awakened thing, my mind just kind of started branching towards these kind of characters
Yeah,
as
that's
well.
what I thought as well. That's
Yeah.
the first thing that I thought these were like very similar because in Dune, if you remember, I mentioned that in Dune there is no machines because there was like a jihad
Hmm.
against all machines, and all machines were made illegal after that. So all calculations, all computations, anything to do with mathematics, anything to do with automation, and is done by humans. So you have humans that literally look like giant sperm whales that are like put into tanks because all they've done is they've just sort of grown their brains. So
Yeah.
you see what I'm talking about. So with a combination of gene splicing and selection, etc., they've created these human beings that are unrecognizable as human. However, genetically they are still fully human. It's just that they've mutated into something completely different because of their function, or what they're going to do for the empire, or whatever. So I was thinking that what's happened here is that you've gotten like where maybe to get strong humans, they've mixed human DNA with bear DNA to get like these bear-like people, like you know, that have all the features of a bear and the strength, but like there's still some human things that you can detect there.
Yeah. That's just the pick.
Yeah.
Oh man. Richie says, has anybody watched an anime called Murdoch Scramble? Never
No,
heard
I
of it.
can't say. No, I wasn't
I'll
aware
Google
of
it
it.
now, but I won't like put it up just in case I get like flagged. It looks sci-fi like. Actually, maybe that's the wrong one. But yeah, that's Exodus. There's going to be a lot more to talk about. Like, we haven't even touched on like some of the other, like, you know, the tidbits of, you know, some people arriving on planets, and then those planets became very toxic. People finding remnant weapons and remnant stuff like that. There's a whole faction of people who have kind of merged with space, alien stuff that's kind of, you know, created a whole new being. There's also people who found technology that have now made them into like fighters, and as time
Yeah.
those fighters then became more kind of toxic because of the newest violence. There's a lot there. But I think in the anime that Rich is talking about, he says there was a scene where the protagonist found a gay couple between a dolphin and a human. We found aware, but the dolphin was human hearts, human smarts. The scene lasted 3 minutes, but it showed how the world changed. Yeah, listen, this can happen. Obviously, no game is going to want to really dive into that too much just because of
No.
the controversy that you get into. If you make them look something like Devora, like like a kind of half human, half dolphin or whatever, I guess people might they're
I
not
mean,
gonna.
that's what Mass Effect is people, wanting to sleep with aliens that look somewhat,
Human.
like an animal and a human combination. I mean, they're sorry look like fish or dolphins or whatever.
Yeah, towards
And
like bird.
then you've got like the Taurians and then the Salarians. I don't know. They look like some sort of an insect. But like whenever you can see, and this is the thing with us human beings, that whenever we can see a semblance of ourselves in something, it's so much easy for us to relate to that thing's character more than something that looks almost identical to us. Like there's just an affinity that we have for things that are just different enough. In fiction, especially, I don't know, in real life, people are just a little bit more close minded. But
Yeah.
no, this is all so exciting. In fact, this game was not even on my radar, Tai, up until I think you started to mention it towards the end of the year last year. Now it's probably my most anticipated game for whenever it launches, whatever generation. I I've gotten to a point where I just don't get that excited anymore about new games because it's an IP I've played. It's a franchise I'm sort of getting tired of. It's a new game that's not made for me. But like this is the first time in a while where I feel that whoever's making this game are the sort of people that made games that I grew up with, that I wanted, like that got me excited every single time there was an E3. Every single time I bought a magazine. This to me is it. I've not been this excited about a game I think in decades.
Yeah, no, I would agree. From a science fiction point of view, like the only thing that's on the radar as well would have been Star Citizen. I'm still I'm still looking forward to that whenever that decides to drop. But the thing is, like Star Citizen will not focus on story. It will focus on obviously on something different. Like Star Citizen will be a bit more like Starfield, probably in terms of just a single player, not really choice driven game. But Exodus is, I guess, at this point now, not that Casey Hudson Studios closed down. It's the spiritual successor to, I guess you could say, Mass Effect. And listen, I hope that title doesn't weigh on them. But at the same time, I think the people behind it have something special and have created a great universe. And just even the the updates that they keep giving you on a regular basis, and the fact that like they had Peter Hamilton, an amazing sci-fi writer. They contacted him to write the book for them. That is something special. So like now you have sci-fi fans who when the game was on their radar, they're now aware of this, right?
Yeah.
They're like, oh shit, Peter Hamilton is working on this. Okay, that's something to kind of look out for. So this is all. Listen, like I know with Mass Effect they had they wrote their books for Andromeda, which I'm not trying to down those writers or whatever, but Peter Hamilton's on a different level. He's not like he's one of the top tier sci-fi writers out there, like currently.
Yeah.
And the fact that they got him, like it blew my mind away. It wasn't some Jack, some Jill. It was Peter freaking Hamilton. So from a marketing point of view, like they're doing the right thing. So. But anyways, listen, we'll talk about Exodus again sometime next week. We'll go through some more of the information. I'll be dropping some videos on it. Ushers, I don't know if you want to talk about, like, we could do a separate podcast later on tonight or this evening or whatever, if you're free, talk about Xbox, whatever. But if you're tired, that's okay as well. Raichi, I don't know how you found this channel. Like, I was a pleasant surprised to see you. I didn't even know at all. But thanks for coming through and asking the questions, dropping off, letting us know about that anime with the dolphin stuff and everything else. I don't know if me and Ushers, I don't know, Ushers, do you want to do another podcast or are you done for tonight?
I just have some stuff to do because we're starting back at work on Monday. So no, we can see tomorrow. Let's check tomorrow. Yeah, what
Richie, we might do something tomorrow on Xbox or whatever. We'll do on the other channel instead.
Yeah.
If you're interested in that, then come through and we'll chit chat. Oh, not just Xbox, just the gaming industry in general, video games, anything like that. But to anyone watching this, thank you for coming through. Thank you for watching. You guys drop a comment if you want to ask any questions about Exodus, and I'll be sure to drop any videos. I'll be sure to let you know when I'm dropping the videos. Ushers, do you want to say anything? Close it off on Exodus, and any videos you're working on.
No, like currently, like I've just put everything on ice, and I don't want to announce anything until it's out. It's just
Yeah.
it's bad luck. Aside from that, guys, I'm normally on Facebook. I'm an old G, so I'm normally on Facebook, on Xbox Players South Africa, and I'm always posting crap on Sorry, not on Instagram, on X or Twitter, under Oshas Oz the Wiz. Sorry. But yeah, it's always Orshus in each and every one of those. But yeah, man, I'm looking forward to this, Ty, and thank you, man, for having this conversation. I really think that like all these conversations that we've been having, I've learned so much about this, and my excitement levels are actually, yeah, like way beyond what I had originally anticipated.
Yeah, listen, thanks for coming through as well. I enjoy these conversations. I enjoy talking about these things. It's always good to. I mean, I'm on Discord with one of my friends, and we just like chit chat, and he's really excited for this game. Not just from because he's like, listen, game doesn't look amazing, but it's like, oh man, story though. He's like, oh, the book, because he's finished the book, and he's like, bro, it gets a lot. Like, there's so much more to glean, and even the community on Reddit, they've all said the same thing, which is basically, if the lore, the story in the book is even like somehow projected into the game, it's like that'll be insane. Now, if we get half of the stuff, cool. But like somehow they try to like get all that shit in. It's like there's just so much there to like so much content to actually like just dive into. But listen, thanks guys for watching, and yeah, we'll see you guys next week.